Morning. That was terrible. Good morning. Much better. Thank you very much. Welcome to Oakland University. My name is Dave Dulio. I am a professor in the political science department. I am also the director of our Center for Civic Engagement. We host events and programs that run the gamut from events like this that's solely focused on voting to any number of issue-related events and conversations throughout the academic year. Just as a highlight, we had former governors Snyder and Blanchard here last month. We're welcoming Congressman John James to talk about Veterans Day in November. And we've got some good stuff in the hopper for the winter semester. Keep an eye out on that, or eye out for that. We launched the Center for Civic Engagement in 2018 to do two things. Number one is to be a convener of conversations about issues of public importance. We are striving to make Oakland University known as the place where you can come for good, fundamental information about issues and politics. And one of our dominant threads that works through all of our work is civility. And because when we have those conversations, we want to have them in the quote unquote right way. We want them to be civil, respectful, deliberative, and productive. And we've worked with any number of organizations, including the Great Lakes Civility Project, headed by Nolan Finley from the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson from NPR in Michigan. We'll welcome them back again in January for another session. The other component of our work is civic literacy. And what we try to host programs, opportunities, activities that bolster civic literacy. In my humble opinion, not enough Americans know enough about their system. And when we have opportunities like this to talk to young people about the process of voting, to talk about ways in which you can, should you so choose, be an active participant in your democratic system, we're all for it. So with that, welcome to Oakland University. I'll turn it over to Landon from Campus Vote Project for more on the day. So welcome again, glad you're here, and enjoy the day.
Hello, everyone. My name is Landon Myers. I'm the Michigan coordinator for the Campus Vote Project. It is amazing to see this many people in one room for a student voting summit. Let's just give a round of applause to that. How many people drove more than 3 hours this morning to make it here? Raise the hands. Quite a few. We even had some brave students who made the trek from Marquette yesterday. And so let's give a round of applause to that. Awesome. So if we can move the slides, I think 2 forward. Welcome. We did the welcome to Oakland. First, I just want to say thank you to our sponsors. One, this event has been hosted now for a few years in partnership with Campus Vote Project and the Michigan Department of State. We're very happy this year to work with Oakland University as well. And I really want to thank our sponsors, the League of Women Voters, All Voting is Local, Promote the Vote, and the Michigan League of Conservation's Education Fund for their support to make today possible. As you can tell, we have a lot of people, requires a lot of resources to make this event the what it is. And we really appreciate the support to bring everyone together to get this nonpartisan voter education and information out to students across the entire state. So awesome. We'll go to the next slide. Okay. Oh, back one. Do a quick agenda overview of what today looks like. As you can tell, we're running a few minutes behind, but that's okay. We scheduled that out. We're used to these type of events, so we know things generally run a little bit. So we're doing the welcome now. We'll have election law updates for about 50 minutes. We'll have our elected official panel with some amazing people, and we'll hear more about that soon. We'll have our keynote address by Senator Jeremy Moss. We'll do our legislative breakout sessions for students to be able to talk with elected officials. And during that time, community partners and campus staff will also be able to connect and network. We'll have lunch and our organization fair to be able to meet different voting rights and other groups around the state. And then on the next slide, we'll have our breakout sessions. The first one, we will have pre-registration and high school engagement. This is the first year that the Student Voting Summit has also included high school programming. And so we're really excited to have high school students here today. How many people from high schools? Woo! And then the college sessions during that time, we'll talk about action planning. There will be a basic 101 and an advanced action planning session, so you can pick at your comfort level. And then the last round of breakouts, we will have youth voice and knowledge in civic education, talking about the importance of considering young people when it comes to education. Community college is voting communities, election officials in your vote, going through the election process and what that looks like. And then student governments as voter advocates. And then we'll have our closing at the end of the day. So that is what our agenda looks like. Next slide. And throughout the day, take pictures. It's wonderful to capture this. If you want to post on social media, you can use the hashtag #MIStudentsVote. That is what we'll be using today. We have a little photo station in the back. There's a poster. There's some whiteboards that you can write on why you vote, why you think that, what your reason is, and what makes voting important to you. And so feel free to take pictures throughout the day of sessions, of your friends, of just all of the great things happening. Next slide, please. Okay, and so we'll start our session. For some of our sessions today, we can take audience questions. With the size of the group, the way we're going to do it, if you can electronically submit on your table, you will see a QR code. Scan the QR code, enter your questions, and then we'll have someone asking questions that are submitted. I also have handouts, so if you want handouts with the QR code. And so for a few sessions today, it will be that same link. It asks what session the question is for. And so just put your questions there and we will get to them. And so without further ado, let's kick off our first session, and I'll welcome up our first speakers to start the day. And there they are. So, yeah, let's give a round of applause, and thank you all so much for showing up today.
Yeah, there's no reason for us to share a mic when there are multiple mics with a great AV and IT team over here. So we're wonderful. And it's a great, well, yeah, give them a hand. Absolutely. We're really happy and privileged to be here for this wonderful bipartisan event. My favorite Republican, our clerk from Macomb County, Tony Forlini, is here. So we're glad to have that spirit of bipartisanship as we really embrace the fact that we have a student voting cycle coming up, a presidential voting cycle for all of us, to lean into ensuring that all of you and all people across our great state have their voices heard in this coming presidential election year. So we're trying to make sure that we lean into that. And so this presentation with Melanie and I will be kind of guiding you through the process that we're going through the next little bit. I have a tiny piece of it, so I'll be popping in and out, but she's really going to be carrying the burden or the wonderful explanation. And we're grateful for you to be here, and the secretary will be here later along with Senator Moss, and we're just really glad to have this opportunity to talk. So thanks. Turn it over to you.
Let's hear it for our Deputy Secretary of State. So thank you for having me here today. This is a really incredible opportunity, and this is seeing the list of people who are going to be here today, your elected officials. You're going to have a really great day. I encourage you to take advantage of it and get out there and get to know them. My name is Melanie Macy. I am Policy Counsel for Promote the Vote. And I'm here to talk to you about elections and voting in Michigan with the help of our Deputy Secretary. So this is a really exciting time to be a voter in Michigan. There's been a lot of changes in the Michigan election law that have made it easier to vote, to exercise the franchise. And if you think about it, the elections and voting are a really unique thing in our world. So when you turn 18 as an American, you automatically enter the most non-exclusive, exclusive club that exists in the country. You are eligible to be able to vote here. And then, of course, there's all these pieces about it, about where you can vote, and when you can vote, how the elections are set up. But elections in Michigan are operating under the idea that everyone should have the opportunity to vote. Everyone should be able to get out there. Everyone should be able to get registered. And so we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about registration and how that works, voting in Michigan and how that works. And then we're going to talk about some of the recent changes in the law, how that might impact you, and also just that you are aware of it. And we're going to talk about the timelines for Michigan and also some things that might be out there on the horizon in terms of the legislation. So we'll get right to it. So in Michigan, you can register all the way up till Election Day. So up until 8 p.m. on Election Day, you are able to register to vote here and then go out and vote. You can vote right at your clerk's office if you register on Election Day. Some methods of registration are only available up until 15 days before Election Day. So if you're going to vote by mail, if you're going to vote at register by mail, register online, or register at a Secretary of State branch office, that needs to be done 15 days in advance. But those last 14 days, you can still register. You just need to go right into your clerk's office. So everyone here is eligible to register to vote if you are an American citizen and you are 17 and a half, and then you can vote if you're going to be 18 by the election and have been a resident for 30 days. So this is what the registration form looks like. You attest that you are a US citizen, and then you can put in your information. If you have a driver's license, that's an easy way to do it. You can also put your social security number. This is just the registration form. It looks pretty similar online or in paper forms, however you want to do it. Here, because you are in Auburn Hills and you have a campus address likely, you are able to register at your home address if it's in Michigan, or at your campus address. So in Michigan, you can choose which one you want to do. So registration online is available. If you aren't registered to vote here in Michigan and you're an American citizen and will be 18 by the next election, you should register to vote. Michigan does have partial automatic voter registration. This is a recent change in the law, like 6 years ago. So if you get your driver's license or state ID or update your address at a Secretary of State branch office, that will mean you're registered unless you choose to decline. So if you have a Michigan driver's license, you may be registered to vote already. And this is an important thing to know. We do see sometimes long lines at campus locations particularly, and I think a lot of students don't realize that they may already be registered to vote based on their driver's license or state ID. And if you change campus addresses, this is tricky, but remain in the same city. So if you are in Auburn Hills and you from year to year change where you're living within Auburn Hills, but you're still living in Auburn Hills, you can still vote at the previous place for a single election. So this is another thing that causes some of those long lines on Election Day, is students lining up and thinking, well, I was at a different address the last time I voted, I need to change it. But actually you can vote one more time at your previous address if you still are in the same city or town. All right, now I'm going to give it back to the Deputy Secretary to talk about how to vote.
Yeah, that'd be great. So how do we vote? I mean, we've had some classic ways of voting. Thank you very much, Sarah. We've had some classic ways of voting throughout the years of just on Election Day. I mean, that's probably the way that most of you and most of us generally just think about elections, is that there's one day, you get in, you get out, that's it. But we are actually transforming this process in Michigan, and we've been doing so through the last number of election cycles. And in 2018, there was a constitutional amendment passed by the voters, I think with 67% of the vote, to allow for no reason absentee voting. And then last year, the Constitution was also changed with another 60% approval of a constitutional amendment to have early voting. And that will be at least 9 days of early voting in communities all across the state. So we have we have now robust options for all of you to decide basically how you want your voices heard. And with absentee voting, you can basically request an absentee ballot, get it back to you, fill it out, mail it in, put it in a drop box, or take it back to your clerk's office. Also with early voting, which I think is the next slide. Oh, I skipped ahead. I guess I should have talked a little bit more about what required on election day. One, I think one of the things that you have to remember is you have to verify your identity. You can do that through bringing your driver's license or your state ID or your campus ID to demonstrate who you are as a person. If for whatever reason, when you show up at an election site, a polling location, and you don't have your ID, you can fill out a absentee or an affidavit rather to assert who you are. So it's pretty important that you have your ID. It makes the process a whole lot smoother, and it's the way that we generally prefer things. But that is an option, is to fill out an affidavit. You can go to michigan.gov/vote to find out your polling location and the different early vote locations once those are all set up. College campus locations, as we've seen in past elections, might have some lines, but persist and get through them, because I think we have a democracy only as strong as your participation is actually in it. So this is the absentee ballot application, and one of the things that you'll see that is different is that blue rectangular box, which allows you to request an absentee ballot that's mailed to you every single election cycle going forward. Currently, under Michigan law, or before the constitutional amendment passed last year, you were on something, basically a permanent absentee application list. So every election cycle, you get an application mailed to you by your clerk asking you whether you wanted an absentee ballot. And it didn't align with how people thought about a permanent absentee list. Most people, when they think about, well, I'm on a permanent absentee list, they think they automatically get the ballot. Well, now the constitutional amendment aligns with that perception, so you can check that box and have a ballot mailed to you automatically. Of course, the key thing that we have to remember is that when you mail in your application, your signature is checked against the signature on file. And then your signature is also checked again when you return your absentee ballot. And those are pretty secure and crucial security considerations. And you can also return that application via mail, Dropbox, or directly to your clerk. So with early voting, it's different from absentee voting. And one of the things that I think some people have been reluctant to embrace absentee voting because they want to see their ballot actually go into the tabulator. They want to see their ballot be counted in some way that they can verify and feel really secure about. And they also want that I voted sticker to wear around on election day or the other days to ensure everybody knows they voted. So that's important too. And early voting is gonna really, I think, take us to another different level as a state. But it's also gonna be extremely hard on our clerks. And I definitely wanna make sure that we acknowledge that in this room at this time. Because we have, in the other states that have early voting, it's more centralized. There are a couple of counties. I remember, I think my second or third week on this job, I started back in March. I reached out to somebody from Texas, and I was trying to explain to them how our decentralized system works. And they're like, wow, why do you do it that way? But I think there's a strength in the decentralization, because the people in their local communities all across the state can actually determine what is best for themselves. And they can defend the integrity of their elections themselves because they have run it. It's your neighbor. It's your friend. It's the people that you go to the fish fry with. They're people that are running your elections. And that's the strength of Michigan elections. But because of that decentralization, it's really hard to make early voting happen. It's really hard because the mindset that we've had for decades is that you have to have a polling location on your corner. But with early voting and with the number of resources, we went to the legislature, and I want to say this, and asked for $177 million. We got 30 million. And I'm not trying to blame the legislature. I'm just trying to point out that we don't have all the resources that we would like to do this in the way that reflects how people have perceived elections in past election cycles. So we're going to have to adjust, and communities are going to have to work together and have joint early voting sites. And we're going to have to figure out, okay, over 9 days, how do we make sure that people know that this is their early voting site, which is different from their election day site? And how do you know, the one thing with absentee voting that's really interesting that people enjoy is that, and this took place pretty heavily in the last presidential election cycle with the presidential primary. I mean, you remember that there was a President Biden won the South Carolina Democratic primary, and then people realized, oh, I want to switch my vote. And they were able to do that under the current law because up to a certain period of time with absentee voting, you can go back to your clerk and spoil your absentee ballot and change your preference. With early voting, once you put it in the tabulator, that's it. And that's another change that we have to get used to. And that's another thing that, you know, voters are not maybe going to understand at first, and that clerks are going to have to explain and maybe get the brunt of criticism of, no, that's how I've always voted. Well, things are changing. So, but I think in the long run, this is going to be a really great thing for our state because we're going to have an additional tool for people to have their voices heard. But in this transition, this 2024 election cycle, where we're doing something new and really unique for the state of Michigan, I hope you have a lot of compassion and support for your local clerks who are literally on the front line fighting to make sure your voices are heard. So with that, let's get on to the next slide.
Yeah, thank you. That is so true. My clerk is here today. Oh, there she is in the back. Also named Melanie. And she's already ready for early voting. And in Oakland County, there is going to be a fair amount of early voting. Not every community this fall, but there will be every community next year. And we'll be talking more about that. So that sort of is a summary of how voting currently works. And then we're going to talk a little bit about recent changes. So things that have happened recently that if you've lived in Michigan and voted in Michigan for a while, maybe you don't know about, or if you're voting for the first time, you'll be glad to hear exist for you now. So early voting, the deputy secretary just pretty much covered that. I have a few more things to say. Absentee voting improvements, enhanced ballot tracking, permanent mail ballot list, campus voting improvement, and then there's some more, we'll call it. So this is an important thing, a little piece of legalese here. So I don't know who knows their Latin, but the timing of these changes is a little bit different here in Michigan. So early voting is in the Constitution for statewide and federal elections. That means it's required for statewide and federal. It's not required for local elections, which is what we're having this year. So it's not required for early voting to take place this year. A number of communities, as I mentioned, are piloting it. So they'll be ready for next year. It is required starting next year for the presidential primary. So you'll be able to early vote no matter where you are in Michigan. The constitutional ballot proposals versus legislation. So constitutional, if it's in the Constitution, which we have now had 2 proposals that have modified the Constitution and given us initial voting rights. If it's in the Constitution, it's already in existence, right? It's in the Constitution, you have that right. If there's pieces of it that are described more fully in legislation, the legislation doesn't always get immediate effect. Here in Michigan, it has to get voted on in both chambers to have immediate effect in order for it to go into effect immediately when the governor signs it. And if it doesn't, then it's subject to sine die plus 90 days. So sine die means without day, and it's when the legislature ends for the year without setting a day to reconvene. So it's basically the last day of the meeting of the legislature for each year. And then of course they will reconvene in January. So many of these laws won't go into effect until 2024, 90 days after they end, which I don't know if we're going to get any hints today about when that's going to happen, but sometime in the next few months, they're going to end. And then 90 days after that is when all the laws that are passed that did not get immediate effect in both chambers will go into effect. And sometimes there's intentional implementation delays built into the law. So as the Deputy Secretary mentioned, there has been quite a lot piled on our clerks in the last few years. There's a lot being asked of them and a lot of changes. And so as the legislature continues to work on more of those and adding more things to the clerks' plates, which in the long run will be great for everyone, but in the short run are a lot to ask. Sometimes they build into the law. This doesn't go into effect until June of 2025. So as I talk about some of these changes, just be aware that some of them will be going into effect immediately, some of them 90 days after signing I, and some of them have been intentionally delayed till later. It's all really clear, right? You've all got it. Okay, so the absentee voting improvements. The state is now required to prepay postage on ballot applications and ballots. This is in the Constitution. It is in effect already. The Secretary of State was hustling really hard to get all the clerks what they needed to have this prepaid postage on there. But this means if you want an application, you can call your clerk and say, can you please mail me an absentee ballot application? They'll mail it to you with prepaid postage. You can mail it back with prepaid postage, and then the same with your ballot. Drop boxes are now required in every city township, one for every 15,000 voters. There were already many, many drop boxes across the state, and now there will be even more. This is in effect already. It's in the Constitution. The Secretary of State was hustling to get the ordering form ready so that the municipalities could order any additional drop box they would need, and they'll be distributed around, and you'll see them. You can please only drop your ballots and applications in drop boxes in your jurisdiction. You would be surprised. And voters must now be given an equitable opportunity to fix signature issues. So you heard the Deputy Secretary talk about how signatures are compared on your application with what's on file and also on your ballot. If you forget to sign it, or if you sign it on the hood of your car before you drop it in the mailbox and it doesn't match your signature, there are now going to be rules in place about how you can cure that. So you'll be notified by the clerk, and you'll have an opportunity to come in and fix your signature and get your ballot or your application back on track. Enhanced ballot tracking. So voters can sign up to receive electronic alerts. So already right now, you could go to MVIC, and you could look up where your absentee ballot is. You could put your information in, and it would say, okay, your ballot's been mailed out, and we haven't received it back yet. But now you'll be able to sign up for a text or an email that will give you that information live. So when it comes into the clerk's office, you'll get a text that says, this is your ballot has been received, and you'll have that sort of continuity of knowing where your ballot is and having some confidence that it is in fact where it should be. This is in the Constitution, and Secretary of State is hustling as we speak to make sure that it is ready for implementation as we move into this election season. I think the Deputy Secretary talked about the permanent mail ballot list already. This is now you can get a ballot mailed to you for every election. I think it's pretty well covered. And I mean, as he said, it had been in the past that you could get an application mailed to you before each election, and already people were confused. And this is sometimes where you would hear like, I got 5 ballots mailed to my house because, you know, I've already received 5 of them. But in fact, what was being received is these applications, which anyone could mail. Like I could mail out to all of you an absentee ballot application, and then you would have more than one in your house, but you can still only get the one ballot. You fill out the application from your clerk. But now you can get a ballot mailed to you each time, but it would only come from your clerk, can't come from me, and you would only get one, but you would get it before every election at the address that you choose. It does get complicated for Michigan's open presidential primary. So when you go in to vote on election day for the presidential primary, you have to say which ballot you want. Do you want a Republican ballot or a Democratic ballot? Because we do not store that information in the Secretary of State's system, you're going to have to, if you're on the permanent mail ballot list, every time there's an election, if you fill out your form, this time, it'll know what you want in February. But then 4 years from now, it may not know what you want. So your clerk is going to send you a little card that says, please tell us which one of these you'd like to receive. I have to return that card. Please return the card. So it's going to be a little bit complicated, but we're going to get through it. Okay, campus voting improvements. So I think we talked about this already. So most voters who register on election day, which can only be done at the municipal clerk's office, end up voting there by absentee ballot, right? That's how it works. You don't have time to get your precinct location, and so you go to the clerk, you fill out, you register, and then you also request an absentee ballot, and they get it. And then they have this huge stack of absentee ballots, especially in the campus clerk's offices that really are a little bit harder to deal with. So there's a change coming into law. This is one of these signing day plus 90, I think. Tell me if I'm wrong, clerks. So it won't be in place until either the presidential primary or the primary in August next year. But there'll be election day vote centers at campuses, at campus locations, or any municipality that has had 500 same-day registrants. So people who show up on election day will be able to put together these election day vote centers where you can go register and then also put your ballot into the tabulator right there at a clerk's office or a satellite office. So this should hopefully minimize those lines on campus. Okay, and then other things happen too. So they weren't quite as exciting and sexy, but I still want to tell you about them. So there's an extension of time to return AV ballots for UOCAVA voters. So UOCAVA is our overseas and military voters. So people who are overseas and military, like it was the case that you had to get your ballot in by 8 p.m. on election day. But you can imagine that if you're mailing something from Germany, if you wait pretty close to the election, then there's a good chance that your ballot's not going to arrive on time. And so now there's a 6-day extension. If your ballot is postmarked by election day and received 6 days after election day, it's still eligible to be counted. This is for overseas and military voters. Pre-election day tabulation, this means that municipalities now will have the opportunity to take their stacks of AV ballots that have been mailed in, and the week before election day will be able to start processing them, which will make it such that those, you might have seen on the news in 2020, those enormous operations like in Detroit, where there's like, I don't even know, lots of ballots being processed and hundreds of tables where this is happening. And it gets pretty chaotic a little bit around it. I will say that the clerks and the election inspectors have it very well in hand. But those will be probably a thing of the past because they'll be able to process those ballots as they come in that week before election, so that we'll have the results sooner on election day. They aren't tabulating they aren't printing any results until 8 p.m. on election day, but they'll be able to stick them in the machine to make it a little faster. Not now because it's in legislation, so it's 90 plus 90, but you'll be able to return absentee ballots to early voting sites. So right now, if you have an absentee ballot and you go to an early voting site because you decide you want to do that, you'll have to give up your absentee ballot and then they'll issue you a new ballot. But starting next year, you'll be able to fill out your absentee ballot at home and then come into an early voting site and you'll be able to put it into the tabulator. So that will be, that to me seems like sort of the ideal. And then there's the expansion of ID for election purposes. I don't know how much this will apply to some of you. There was a slight expansion in the wording for educational institutions. Point is, if you have a campus ID, you can use that as your identification when you go in to vote. And these are things that are maybe more to come. So pre-registration would allow, these are things that are in the legislature working through right now. There's discussions happening with the legislators, with the administration, and with the clerks on how to make these work. But these are improvements that could be coming for voters soon. One of them is pre-registration. 16-year-olds will be allowed to pre-register, which would be getting them in the system when they get their license. Right now, when in Michigan, you get your license at 16 and you often don't go back to the office until you're 21. So the automatic voter registration that happens right now, if you go and get your license or update your address, we're missing 18 to 21-year-olds. So pre-registration would allow them at 16 to get into the system. And then at 17 and a half, when they're eligible for the next election, they would be automatically registered. So that'll capture a much larger group of the younger people who are not currently registered. And secure automatic voter registration. So we already have partial automatic voter registration. This is just a secure upgrade to that will expedite the process at the Secretary of State branch offices and will expand to other agencies, including Medicaid signups. That will be something we'll be working hand in hand with the federal government. And so they still have to release some guidelines for that, but we're hoping it will come soon. And most excitingly, the Michigan Voting Rights Act, for which I will turn it back to our Deputy Secretary.
Right, thank you. So I'll probably close things out here with the Michigan Voting Rights Act and then an overview of the timeline. I need the clicker. Thanks. So I think a lot of people have wondered, since this was introduced back in June by the Secretary of State and Senator Camilleri, why do we need a Voting Rights Act? Why do we need it in Michigan? I will be the first to say, and I will always say, that I believe that we have the strongest voting system in the country. With all of the changes that we've made in 2018 and 2022, and in this year in implementing these laws, I think we have a system that is extremely strong, extremely secure, and extremely accessible. But we did realize and did see in 2020 a number of attacks on democracy, which continue. None of us ever thought that there would ever be a January 6th. None of us ever thought that that would happen. And we have to be prepared to defend what we have. And that's what the Michigan Voting Rights Act is going to do. We're going to ensure that there's no voter suppression. We're going to extend protections to folks who need ballots translated into different languages. Not every voter in the state speaks English as a first language, and they deserve to have access to the ballot as well. We're also going to ensure that voters who are disabled also have robust access to the ballot. And if there is an issue, that they have a way to respond to that. So we're committed to in the near future on this, and we continue to work with all major stakeholders to find points of agreement. Now, election timelines. One of the major things that we're dealing with this year is that we're trying to get the early voting poll book tool up and running, which has been a monumental project, both for our Bureau of Elections, but also for DTMB, which is a department in the state that deals with all technology and all of those things that I never even want to get into. But they are very much on our side with this. And this year, in a number of different communities, in Oakland County especially, we'll be piloting that technology to kind of make sure that we've got everything checked out for the presidential primary coming up in February and ensure that we're on schedule. Now, next year, we've got the presidential primary on February 27th. Early voting would start at a minimum on February 18th. Then we would have the regular state primary. And those of us who are on the ballot, I see some state reps here. This is an important day for you. August 6th, and early voting would start July 27th, which is a great day because it's also my birthday. So it's a wonderful day in the state of Michigan that day. And then November 5th, which was our general election, and early voting would start on October 26th. So those are the dates to keep in mind going forward. You now have early voting as an option, you have absentee voting as an option, and you have election day. So there's no excuse not to go out. And with that, these are all the things that we've talked about. You know them, so we don't need to go over them again. But let's take some questions. Thank you very much.
We do have a few questions that were submitted via the QR code, so we'll start with those. Can 17-year-olds vote in the primary as long as they will turn 18 prior to the general election?
No, you're not allowed to vote until you're 18 on election day.
Next one is, what is a provisional ballot? What's its purpose and how is it processed?
So why don't you answer that?
So I'm gonna get a clerk up here to answer that. Okay, a provisional ballot, or somebody shake their head if I start saying the wrong thing. A provisional ballot is mostly issued in Michigan now only because we have same-day registration. So you can register up to the day. It used to be that if you weren't registered 30 days in advance, you weren't able to register. And so there was more provisional ballots in the past, but there are still some provisional ballots. Essentially, if I show up at my polling place and my name's not on the list, but I swear that I registered and I don't have any proof of it, and I'm like, look, I know I'm registered and this is the place, they'll be like, all right. And then they'll let me fill out a ballot, and then they'll put it in a special envelope and they'll put it aside. And then I can go to my clerk, Melanie, later within six days, thank you. And I can say, see, I registered. Here's the proof that I registered, or she will have the proof that I registered. And then they will take my ballot out of the envelope and it will be counted. And if I don't show up, then it will not be counted. Did I get it right?
Yes, I would add, you see how complicated and convoluted and messy that situation is. It's best that if there's an issue, at your polling location and your name is not on the list, go to your clerk's office, same day register, and vote that way. Because it's easier for you, it's easier for the clerks, it's easier for everybody just to go that process. And if there's any doubt in your mind about your registration status, early vote, because then you'll have 9 days to figure it out, rather than election day and you got to go to class, or you've got to do this, there's so many things that happen in somebody's life. I mean, there are those of us who are in this room who are clerks, election officials, elected officials. We live and breathe this stuff. We're rare, we're geeks. Most people don't care until election day. And so we get that. And that's why the options are here and the tools are here to give you the flexibility to figure it out on your schedule. So the more time you give yourself, the more you can deal with the just natural things that happen with a convoluted process. Next question, Bobby.
If you're on the permanent absentee list and you move, how does the state know that you moved?
So you're presumably at some point going to update your driver's license. You're supposed to do that. And so when you move, you update your driver's license, and that updates your voter record in the QVF. So that's how that happens.
And you would stay on the permanent absentee ballot list if that happens. So you would still get, if you update your address, either you do it proactively by going to your clerk or through the driver's license, you would still remain on the permanent mail ballot list with that updated address.
It travels with you.
How do you apply to register to vote if you do not have a permanent address?
Well, there are different ways. If you don't have a permanent address, you can register at a place where you'll get mail and where you consider to be your official domicile. So that's really up to you, where you believe that you call home, whether that's a homeless shelter, a street corner, or just even your dorm room, not to equate those two things. So I noticed the words were coming together in a way that I didn't intend them to. But it's really where you believe is home. And that's what your permanent address is. That's your permanent location. And that's where you're considered a registered voter. But anyone, regardless of your housing status, is eligible to vote in the state.
The last one here ties kind of into that last one. If I'm an out-of-state student from another state attending school here, can I register to vote?
Oh, yes. Yes, you can. You can use your campus address, or as the Deputy Secretary said, there are various addresses you can use, but here in Michigan, you are absolutely able to vote at your campus address or your home address, not both. But you can choose. It's up to you. And if this is where you're spending most of your time, it probably makes the most sense if you're going to be here on election day to register here.
And another thing that I think people will be curious about is, I think there's also, when I've heard that question before, do I have to get a Michigan driver's license? No, we'd love you to, because we want you to stay here and be proud Michiganians. I like the term Michiganian rather than Michigander, but I'm in the minority on that one. I keep losing it, but it's okay. They'll be there one day. We're gonna once again have Michiganian as the favored term, but it's not today. I concede that. But we want you to all be Michiganians, and eventually, oh man, there's just. But it's okay. But we want you to all be residents of the state. So get your driver's license here, be a resident here. But if you decide you want to take a little bit more time to figure that out, you can certainly register with your out-of-state ID as your proof of identity. So with that, we're really grateful to have you here, and we're going to move on with our discussion. Thank you so much.
Awesome. I will pass it off to two Oakland University students who will be introducing our panelists, and then we'll welcome our panelists. So without further ado, I will pass it off and to our students.
Greetings, fellow Michiganders. Today we have with us a panel of elected public servants who will join us on stage in a moment to discuss the importance of youth voting and civic engagement. While each of our panelists here today are now successful and prominent elected leaders in our state, each of them began their careers right where we are. They began as students. Each of our panelists here today know the power of the voice of young voters and want to encourage increased civic involvement, and I'm looking forward to hearing from them all. The first official we'd like to welcome will serve as the moderator of our esteemed panel. A former dean at Wayne State University Law School in Detroit, Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson was elected as Michigan's 43rd Secretary of State in 2018 and is now in her second term. Prior to obtaining her JD from spent time working for the Southern Poverty Law Center in Montgomery, Alabama, where she worked undercover to investigate domestic terrorist cells, including neo-Nazi and white supremacist groups. In 2015, she became one of the youngest women in history to be inducted into the Michigan Women's Hall of Fame. And in January of this year, Secretary Benson was awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal by President Joe Biden for her exemplary public service to advance free and fair elections. Please welcome our panel moderator, Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, to the stage. You want to sit down because we have more.
All right. Next up, joining our panel, a graduate from Bloomfield High School, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel studied political science at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and obtained her JD from Wayne State University Law School. She's previously worked for the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office before opening her own legal firm, where she was instrumental in the legal case going all the way to the Supreme Court that resulted in the recognition of same-sex marriage in the United States. As the founder of Fair Michigan, I heard some clapping start and I didn't want to cut it off. She's as the founder of Fair Michigan, a nonprofit working to prosecute hate crimes across the LGBTQIA community. Attorney General Nessel is the first LGBTQIA plus person to be elected to statewide office in Michigan. As Attorney General, Dana Nessel has worked diligently to protect Michigan's elections and uphold Michigan's election law. Please welcome to our first panelist to the stage, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel.
Our next panelist is a lifelong resident of Southfield, Michigan. State Senator Jeremy Moss graduated from Wiley E. Groves High School in Beverly Hills, Michigan, and attended Michigan State University, where he studied journalism and political science. Senator Moss serves Michigan's 7th Senate District, which includes Auburn Hills, Bloomfield Township, Pontiac, Southfield, and also the Oakland University campus. He currently serves as the president pro tempore of the Michigan Senate, chair of the Elections and Ethics Committee. Please welcome Jeremy Moss to the stage.
Turn off the microphone when I try to clap this time. A graduate from Everett High School in Lansing, Michigan, our next panelist, State Senator Sarah Anthony, attended Central Michigan University studying political science and legal studies, and earned a Master's of Public Administration at Western Michigan University. Serving Michigan's 21st Senate District, including all of Eaton County and the Southwest Lansing metro area, Senator Anthony is Mid-Michigan's first African-American woman to be elected to the Michigan House of Representatives and State Senate. Please welcome to the stage, Senator Sarah Anthony.
We're not wearing pink. We feel left out a little bit.
Hailing from St. Clair Shores, our next panelist, Macomb County Clerk Anthony G. Forlini, graduated from Western Michigan University with a degree in business. From 2010 to 2016, Clerk Forlini served in the Michigan State House of Representatives, representing the 24th House District. Clerk Forlini ran for Macomb County Clerk in 2020 with the campaign tagline, "Every vote matters, every vote counts," and was elected as Macomb County Clerk in 2020. As a county clerk, Clerk Forlini is responsible for coordinating and administrating all federal, state, county, and school district elections held in Macomb County. Please welcome Clerk Forlini to the stage.
There we go. A fun puzzle trying to get everybody on the stage. Our last panelist, or our final panelist, of the day hails from Dearborn, Michigan. State Representative Erin Barnes attended the University of Michigan Dearborn, graduating with a degree in women and gender studies, and earned a Master of Science in Education from Brooklyn College. Sorry, let me flip the page real quick. A former special education teacher, Representative Barnes also worked as an educator at the University of Michigan and was elected to Michigan's House as a representative for Michigan's 15th House District in 2018, representing Dearborn and Dearborn Heights. Please welcome our final panelist participant to the stage. That's a lot of syllables all at once. State Representative Erin Barnes. Here today, and I'll hand it over to Secretary Benson to start off the discussion.
Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate you both for that great introduction, and to all of our panelists. We've also got some other distinguished guests in the audience who I'm going to recognize in a moment, but I want to thank you all for joining us today for what I hope will be an informative panel. And I hope every single one of you leaves with a sense of both what your role is going to be in helping ensure our elections run smoothly, but also in how you're going to engage your peers, because no matter where someone is, or who they vote for, or what perspective they may have, or what party they may affiliate with, we want everyone to feel they have a voice at the table, to know that their vote's going to count. And we want to work with everyone to ensure that they have faith in the process and confidence in our elections. And our leaders up here today are going to talk in different ways about what we're already doing to prepare. But I hope you see this as an opportunity not just to hear and learn, but to think about what your part's going to be, and what people who aren't here in this room, how you're going to engage them more in this from all spectrums and all perspectives. And so I want to thank also the College Student Advisory Task Force, Landon Myers, our Michigan coordinator for the Campus Vote Project, for working to also put this together. The turnout is fantastic. And I certainly want to thank Oakland University for hosting us, the students, faculty, administrators who have been truly helpful at every step of the way in engaging on many fronts, students and young people in our election arena. And we also, of course, have leaders from All Voting is Local here as well, and our other university partners and leaders throughout the state. In addition, we have a great election administrator in the audience today, and Kim Meltzer is here. Thank you, Kim. It's been great work for a long time in the field, and will be on hand to answer your questions. And we also have two other lawmakers here today, Representative Mike Harris, who's with us, as well as Representative Natalie Price as well, who've joined us. Thank you both. And please, am I forgetting any, or I'm not? Oh, Sterling Heights. Oh, sorry. Yes, Sterling Heights as well. Thank you for being here as well. But I wanted to know that, so that if you have questions for them, certainly having lawmakers, state reps in the audience as well is a great opportunity for you to share your perspectives and hear from them about their priorities as well. So thank you guys for spending some time with us this morning. So on that note, I want to talk about the path forward. Yesterday, we announced our third Collegiate Student Advisory Task Force. Now, that is really our effort to engage students from all walks of life across Michigan, Democrats and Republicans and independents, for Marie, I didn't see you. Sorry, Clerk Wicks as well. Sorry. Thank you. Go Green for being here. Thank you for being here as well. So again, make sure you connect with all of these great distinguished folks who are here today, so they can hear from you and you can learn from them. I'm really proud because of the work we've been able to do with so many of you and others across the state. Michigan has led the nation in youth vote turnout. Young people from both sides of the aisle participating in our elections, which is a great thing, great thing, great success, but it's not enough, because still less than 50% of eligible young voters in Michigan are participating in our elections. And so really our charge, all of our charge moving forward, I think, is to think about who's not engaged and work on engaging them and making sure we continue this trajectory, moving to making Michigan a state where everyone has a voice, everyone is heard, and where everyone has a seat at the table. The good news is that we're already on our way to doing that. Part of the way we do that is by having gatherings today where we collaborate and leave with a sense of next steps and action items that we all can engage in as we work to prepare for 3 statewide elections next year. 3 statewide elections that, among other things, will have 9 days of early voting, alongside election day registration and automatic voter registration and no reason absentee voting and drop boxes throughout the state. We've got a lot of work to do, not just to make sure alongside our great clerks that we're ready and we have the infrastructure ready to go to deliver on all these things, but that folks know about it and that citizens know the security of the system, the accessibility of the system, and all the work that our clerks and others are doing to make sure every resident can have faith in our elections. As we begin today, we're going to have our panelists talk about what they're doing on that front to help us prepare for 2024, and also what you can do about their work and how you can support theirs and other work happening all around their state to prepare. So as I mentioned, the November election of last year had the largest youth turnout in a midterm in our state's history and was larger than any other state in the nation. So I want to start by actually asking our panelists, and actually Clerk Forlini, I'll start with you. What's your take on why we saw so many young people voting in 2022? And what did you see in Macomb County?
You hear me? There we go. You know, so back in 2020, I wasn't the clerk. I was running for clerk. And it was such an odd time to be running any kind of an election with COVID. The campaigning was different. Everything was different. I think the fact that college kids were engaged, I think is a great thing. And but it's an important thing also that college kids are educated also. We all need to be educated. We need to know. And so I even think with my campaign, there wasn't enough interaction out in the public because everything was social media. Everything was, you know, what you can see on your phone as opposed to face to face. So the fact that college kids had such a huge impact, I looked at for instance, Washtenaw. You look at the amount of people that voted in Washtenaw, it was unbelievable, and that was college town, right? And hats off to Washtenaw, their website. It's awesome. You can look at historical stuff. They got one of the best. The clerk. Where is the clerk? I thought I saw him here. Anyhow,
Larry Kestenbaum here?
Maybe not.
Okay.
Maybe not. So anyhow, I can't really answer why the kids voted so much, but I think that, you know, obviously the temperature was up, right? And it's going to be up again in 2024. So the big thing is be educated. And I think, you know, you're going to see, I think, a repeat of whatever it is that how you're going to vote. But the key for me is I'm hoping that college campuses are going to be inclusive and allow everyone to speak and everyone to have an opportunity to share their point of view so that the students are educated when they vote.
Great, thanks. Senator Anthony, you've got a college campus in your district. Certainly you've been on the front lines in many ways in fighting for every voice and an inclusive democracy. What's your take as to what worked in 22 to help get young people engaged and what we can do in 24 to keep the momentum going?
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you for I feel so honored. I feel so special. So every part of my campaign, everything we do in our office centers on marginalized communities and uplifting voices from every corner of our district, every corner of the state. And that obviously always includes young people. And I remember in 2022, we were watching history being made in this state. And in many ways, all roads led to long lines at Michigan State University, in which young people stayed in line hour after hour after hour. And I remember going out, giving water and pizza and making sure that they stayed in line. And when I was kind of talking to my mother about the why, like, why do you think these young people are out there? It was so evident that young people were not only fired up, but they were angry. They were angry that a government that was supposed to be serving them was trying to take away their fundamental rights, rights to their body, rights to their ability to walk down streets and be safe. The fact that gun violence is rampant in many communities that we all come from, and yet elected officials were ignoring these types of incidences of violence. When we think about the quality of our environment, and we had lawmakers on the state and federal level literally just ignoring everything that we know about climate change and the crises that are ahead of us, young people were angry. There was a sense of energy And many groups and individuals like the folks on this panel were elevating these conversations and educating folks to say, if you want to have something done about reproductive health care, if you want your streets safer, if you want an ability to vote easier, if you want a state that is reflective of the diversity that we know and we love, all roads are going to lead to you standing in this line and making your voice heard. And I think that that clear line from point A to point B made sure that young people were not just on Twitter and on TikTok and elevating videos. We got away from our phones and computers, and young people lifted up their voices in a real way. It was something I had never experienced before, but it not only inspired people across mid-Michigan, but across the country, that we could actually see young people be center stage in these conversations. And the last thing I'll say is that every politician that you will ever meet will always have a focus on senior citizens. We always have newsletters. We have a strategy to make sure that we are reaching out to senior citizens. Why? Not only because they're a valuable part of our citizenry, but they consistently vote. We know that we have to make sure that we are going to their doors, making calls, targeting ads to make sure that we are in front of them. I would love to see a world in which we have that same energy for young people, because your issues are just as important. So
thank you, Senator Anthony. That's great. And Senator Moss, on the energy and also the lines and both Michigan State and University of Michigan campus, a lot of students waiting to the 4:30 on election day to both register and then vote. I know you and I have talked in your capacity as the chair of the Senate Elections Committee. You've really prioritized making sure that we put pieces in place to make sure that we're ready for 24 and our campuses are ready too. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the policies that you're working to put in place and champion to ensure that we are ready to go for 24?
Absolutely. We've done so much work with our Secretary of State and Attorney General, with other lawmakers, with election administrators at every level to make it more convenient to exercise your right to vote, to reduce those administrative burdens on our local clerks, and also to reduce barriers to the ballot. So starting this year, and I'm going to speak about it a little bit later on in the program here, you will be able to vote in person at an early voting center some 9 days before Election Day at a polling location that basically looks like your polling location on Election Day. You get the ballot, you go into the booth, you feed it to the tabulator on site. It will hopefully alleviate some of the Election Day administration burdens, but we know also, because we had wonderful testimony from Marie Wicks and Jackie Boudry in our committee this past week, Jackie Boudry representing Ann Arbor, Marie representing East Lansing, about what were some of the burdens on Election Day that led to those long lines. The last voter got in line at 8 p.m. and then that person voted at midnight. And so that person voted and their vote counted, but there were onerous requirements to be an Election Day voter if you registered that to vote that day. You had to be issued a challenge ballot instead of a normal ballot. It required some clerk administrative duties before you could get that ballot. It's not grounded in data and it's not grounded in science. And we are uplifting the voices of election administrators to make the Election Day, if you vote, register to vote on Election Day, it easier and quicker to process you through the lines. And that's been an important key change that we're fighting for, to alleviate those long lines. So we have work that we've done on the front end to give you more options, and on Election Day, we're reducing administrative burdens on our election officials to make sure those lines move quickly.
That's great. And I know you can't do it alone. You've got partners in the House as well, and the state legislature, and Rep. Burns is chair of the Ethics Committee in the House. Would love to hear about the work you're doing to similarly ensure that the work happening in the Senate has partners in the House and that things get through and even expanded upon and improved upon and through your process.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for the question. I think we absolutely have a wonderful partnership between the two chambers. And I know we were talking about, student and youth turnout earlier. And full disclosure, before I joined the legislature, I worked at the University of Michigan's Ann Arbor campus, so was really charged with our nonpartisan student turnout work, which is, I think, critically important. So I think everything that we do in the legislature really needs to focus on inclusivity and connection with people. We never want to be trapped inside kind of the bubble of Lansing, right? That's why an event like today is so important. So through the ethics committee, and I also serve on the elections committee with Chairwoman Cerniglu, who's a fantastic partner, we are really looking to develop and implement policies that will help people on the ground. It's not enough to simply talk about the issues. And when we talk about turnout and we talk about young people and their passion for voting, we have to make sure that we have people on the ballot and issues on the ballot that folks care about. We need to make sure we have candidates who are really about doing the work that our people are demanding of us. And that's really, I think, what we're looking to do between both chambers now with the elections committees. I think that's critically important. Voting is a very real, tangible, and in many cases, life-changing thing. And I think we saw a tremendous turnout in 22, and we'll see that again in 24, because we have people who are doing the work that our people are demanding of us. We have issues on the ballot that relate directly to, I think, some of the pain, quite honestly, that people are feeling on the ground in their day-to-day lives. And so I think these changes to our voting laws, expanding access, is really about meeting people where they are and delivering on promises that we've made. So I think we're looking to do that certainly in the House.
That's great. Go ahead, Clerk Fellini, if you want to add.
I did want to talk a little bit about we're talking about this early voting. And I think the long lines that we talk about and the pressure on the clerks is unbelievable. And I've got a couple of my clerks here today, and it concerns me because we're in the middle of an experiment. We're in the middle of an experiment with the software, right? We're in the middle of an experiment, how they're going to get enough poll workers, how they're going to spend enough time, and the money. In the state, unfortunately, the legislature came up with a dollar amount, right? We're going to pay 40% if you don't combine with other communities. We're going to pay 80% if you do. But I've never seen a state program in Lansing say, we're going to pay you 40% of the money, but we want you to do 100% of the work. And so it's kind of crazy to me. And I think you guys all know how I feel, but I really got to stress, as far as voting and whatnot, get in there early, be respectful to the workers. And I just don't, I used to be a legislator, and I was always fighting against unfunded mandates. And I realized that the legislator, this wasn't a legislative thing. It was a ballot initiative, right? But I've never seen ballot initiative that wasn't fully funded either. There was always money available for Lansing government activities. And if you didn't get it, you didn't get the service. I mean, I can't imagine a clerk saying, well, we got 40%. We're gonna do 4 days of early voting, and we're gonna let the state do the other 5. It's not gonna happen, right? So there's a lot of pressure on these clerks to perform at 100% level, which they do, but only get 40% funding. And that's, Bureau of Elections passed this down, but they also got the funding from the state legislature, and the state legislature is the one that came up with that monies. So they have to allocate it somehow. But we need to recognize local clerks are the real heroes in this, making the elections successful. But we need partners, and we need workers. We need poll challengers that are educated, so they come and they do their job appropriately, not abusively. But the poll workers need to also have that knowledge, right? That what their rights are, what the poll challengers' rights are. So we're in the middle of a big education thing to try to get this information out to the public. And it scares me, this 9 days of early voting without the proper funding. And we get some smaller communities that say, I don't know where we're going to come up with the money from if we don't get 100%.
Yeah, and we've been proud to be working with every community in the state to make sure we have the funding, and grateful for our legislative partners who've worked for the first time to ensure there's any state funding for elections, which in the past has not been a thing. It's all been locally funded. And of course, you've got the federal government's responsibility as well that we continue to advocate for. All of it's also recognizing the importance of not just educating voters proactively, but also responding to misinformation and responding to threats that have been very real for our election workers on both sides of the aisle all across the state. And I know Attorney General Nessel, you've been really out in front at making sure not just our poll workers are protected, but that voters are protected too. So no one need fear their safety when they go to the polling place, when they go to vote and participate in their electoral process. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your work and the partnerships you've built with law enforcement across the state to ensure we're all working together to protect the process.
Making sure it's on. Yeah, thank you, Secretary Benson. And you know more than anybody about this because, of course, the partnership that we form between our agencies to ensure that that voters know that they're safe and secure in their ability to vote, but also that, you know, poll workers, that clerks can be free of concerns about threats, intimidation, harassment. And so what we did in 2019 actually is we formed the Hate Crimes and Domestic Terrorism Unit of the Department of Attorney General. And we have had, unfortunately, far too many cases where we have election workers that have been subjected to threats. But, you know, one thing that all of those cases have in common, we charge those cases and we hold people accountable. And I know that's something that's happening right now in the House, right? I believe that there are bills that would enhance and more specialize what happens if somebody threatens someone that has in any way, shape, or form to do with our election system, understanding the repercussions to our democracy if people don't feel safe voting or administering elections. It's critically important. But we handle those matters. We work with law enforcement at every level. So at the federal level, we work with the Michigan State Police, with our local partners, municipal partners. And what we do in concert with the Department of State, with the Secretary of State's office, you know, we issue guidance to all of law enforcement prior to every election to really walk them through exactly what the law is, but also how to handle any set of circumstances should they arise, to ensure that everybody's on the same page, everybody understands what their obligations are, what the law clearly states, and that we are enforcing the law to make sure that our elections run as smoothly as possible. And I have to say, with very few exceptions, even though I know there's a lot of you know, misinformation out there about, you know, scary things that happen at the polls, we actually have seen very, very little of that, all things considered. And I know people can be afraid, but it's not actually based on real events that have occurred here in the state of Michigan. And we are determined to keep it that way.
Thank you. And I want to, we are working together to make sure the case. I want to do 2 quick lightning round questions, and then we've got a keynote address coming up from Senator Moss talking more about the policies. But I also want to recognize State Rep Mark Rochester Hills here. Where are you? There he is back there. Sorry, I didn't see you, Rep, earlier. Thank you again. Again, want to point our lawmakers out to you so that you've got opportunities to interact with them and hear from them as well throughout the day. So 2 lightning round questions for each of you to go through. And we'll start with you, Rep Burns, and go this way. Because recognizing all of you are here, I know every single one of you are going to be an election worker in your community in Michigan, right? This year. You know, we can also have 16 and 17-year-olds can also be election workers as well. And just so spread that around. Also, just a note, I was at a meeting yesterday and learned that some young high school students got college scholarships from colleges who recognize their service and civic engagement and serving as an election worker. So there are many, many, many benefits in addition to supporting democracy that can be yielded from serving as an election worker. And you can always go to michigan.gov/democracy MVP to sign up and get engaged, and we can get you to the clerks and all the materials you need to be part of the process. So that's my ask, advice, and recommendation for all of you here today. And I want to now ask our panelists, what advice do you have for the students and young people who are here, who are interested in making an impact on their communities and potentially even running for office?
Sure, it's a great question. So I think for anyone looking to get involved in their community, first I would say, don't doubt yourself. You have everything you need inside of you to be successful. And we need you all to really tap into the core of who you are and your passion. I think being authentic is everything. Whether you're getting involved in your community through activism, joining an organization, whether you're looking to run for office, it may sound really basic, but being who you are is your superpower. There's only one of you. So be that and really lean into that. The other thing I would say, and I'll keep it brief because I know it's a lightning round, is just find your people. When you find the right team, you will be unstoppable. So those would be my suggestions.
Clerk Forlini?
I'm going to go a little contrary to a few things here. First off, if you want to get involved in your community, you need to vote in your community. Is Oakland University your community? Maybe it is now, but you're going to be going hopefully back home in Michigan and being a part of that community. Maybe that's where you want to vote. So let's not forget about that. The other thing, I was on college campus. I was involved. I was president of my dorm and I enjoyed the politics. And then I was going to go into politics. So I'm going to go a little bit opposite just for thought to be different, I guess. And I wouldn't get into politics until I knew I had kids and the struggles with kids, a real job, a mortgage, college education to be funded, retirement that had to be funded. I wouldn't get into it until I knew those things were taken care of in my life. And then I decided to move forward because now I knew the struggles that people have and I can identify with that and be a real representative of the people. So that was kind of my spin on things.
Thanks, Clark. Senator Anthony. Hey.
Listen, I'm gonna give you real talk. Yes, run for office if that is your path, but be a good citizen. No one should have to beg you, pry you, feed you in order for you to do your civic duty. Voting is the first step. The second big step is holding elected officials accountable at the local, state, and federal level. It is very easy. It is so easy for us to tell you everything that we can do. We can promise you puppies and lollipops and free everything when we are asking for your vote. The real work happens the moment that we have these titles. And so holding elected officials accountable is your most basic civic duty. And I will tell you, across the country, there are states that are not like Michigan, who are working not to expand the right to vote, not to give additional days for us to vote. They're trying to suppress the vote, and they are suppressing your vote and people of color. But my ancestors will not allow me to sit out on any election because they died for the right. So just a little real talk that it is step one to vote, but holding elected officials accountable is quite honestly the rent you are paying for being a citizen in this democracy.
Thank you. Senator Moss.
Preach. I think what's most important is you're here, you're engaged, and these opportunities are not out of your reach. I had a different journey than Clerk Forlini. When I was 24 years old and living in Southfield, there was nobody on the city council that was under the age of 55. And the oldest local elected official at the time was on our council, and he was 94. So there was a big gap, and there were people whose voices were missing in the process. So your station in life, your lived experience as a young person absolutely should have a spot at the table. I ran and I won a seat on the Southfield City Council because other people, including older members of our community, saw value in age diversity as much as any other aspect of diversity. So these opportunities for you, and you do not have to run, you don't have to file to run for office tomorrow. If you're not comfortable, if you're not ready, but the opportunities to get engaged are right before you. Do not put elected officials on a pedestal. Do not put these opportunities out of your reach. We're here. We're here because we want to hear from you and engage with you. Seek out opportunities to volunteer, to intern, to work part-time, because your perspective in all of this is valuable because you hear it all the time. You are the future. The things that are going on right now are going to dictate things in your future when you get a job and when you have a mortgage and when you get married. So you should be a part of the conversation right now.
And AG Nessel.
I think I can't say it better than everything has already been said. I do want to tell you a very quick story though. And it's when I was in college in the 1800s. It was 1990. It was a long time ago. And I was trying to, first of all, I knew I was absolutely going to vote, but I was trying to decide where to vote. And I found out that a woman that I knew who I actually went to college with at the University of Michigan was running for state representative in my hometown in West Bloomfield. Honestly, I thought she was maybe the worst person that I had ever met in life so far at that point. Since then, I've met many worse people. But she was her beliefs were so antithetical to mine in every single way, shape, or form. The thought of her representing my community in Lansing was repugnant to me. So I made sure that I registered to vote at, my home where I grew up with, in my parents' house. And it was difficult to vote in those days. You couldn't vote absentee without, jumping through a lot of different hoops. I remember driving from Ann Arbor to West Bloomfield to vote that day. She lost by one vote. One vote. You can look it up. You can Google it. You can Wikipedia it. She lost by one vote because I made sure to vote against her. And so, no, but I mean, I think it would have been very dangerous for this woman to serve in our state legislature. It would have been. And I'm saying that's how you have to approach every single solitary election, that this could be the difference. One vote, your vote might be the difference between your candidate winning or losing, because sometimes it really is. And these elections are incredibly powerful in your lives. Whether you know it or not, you might not remember any of our names in 5 years, in 10 years, or you might not even know some of them still now, right? But the decisions that we're making for you will make a difference in all kinds of ways in your life, each and every day, whether you know it or not. It's on you to make sure, and it's easier now than ever to learn about the people that are running for office at the local level, at the county level, at the state level, at the federal level. It's easy to find out. It's not that time consuming, but whether you decide to participate in the process or not will, not might, but will affect each and every component of your life. So get involved and stay involved, because your vote matters.
Thank you. And we're now joined by Representative Amos O'Neill. Thank you for joining us, Rep. Great to see you here as well. And Sharon McDonald, good to see you as well. Thank you for being here. And Dom Clemmings, County Clerk from Genesee County. There you are. I didn't see you there. So again, more shout outs to the elected officials in the audience who are getting it done and showing up today. I mean, I think I have one more question for our panel, but I also want to just take a note to say, and you're going to hear from more folks throughout the day. But in many ways, as has been already talked about, there's a disconnect between young voters and in some cases, young voters or voters on college campuses and folks who are serving in Lansing or at the local level. Sometimes there can be a disconnect. And sometimes people don't show up to events to hear from you, to meet you where you are, and to talk with you and listen to you about what your concerns are. So shout out to everyone today who showed up and showed up to hear from you and be in this room with you and listen to you and debate with you, because that's the work. And I'm grateful for so many folks showing up today to connect with you all and learn from you and hear from you and you from them. So that said, my last question for our group up here is so that we can move on with a lot more great content today, is what has, we often get into public service, whether it's voting or elect or running for office or advocating for issues or holding folks accountable. And when we get to the other side, when you're actually in the role that you aspire to be in, let's say, sometimes things are a little bit different. And one of the things that I really, having a career outside of elected office and now serving in elected office, I always wanted to know, when you pass that, when you're in that position, does something surprise you or change or alter the way you see the role? Or another way to think about it is, how do you ensure that anything you do encounter that's surprising or unexpected doesn't change your why or your reason for getting into service in the first place? And ultimately, I think I try to think a lot about how can you make sure you stay rooted in your why, your cause, your purpose, the reason you're doing what you do, the reason you serve. And what sometimes happens unexpectedly when you get into public service that could take you away from that, and how do you resist that? It's all tied up in, what has surprised you, or what have you found, what is be one of the most unexpected things that you've encountered now as servants, public servants, and how have you dealt with it in a way that helps you stay true to who you are? And Rep. Burns, you talked about authenticity in your remarks earlier. Would love to hear how you've held on to that authenticity as you've now
Yeah.
entered your role as a public servant?
Sure. That's a wonderful question. I wish I could think about this and probably talk about this for days. I mean, I think for me, coming from local government for a few years prior to being in Lansing certainly helped, because I think when you're in local government, you're really on the front line of service and there is nowhere to hide. Anyone who's done local government knows what I mean. But I mean that in the best way. And so I think for me, like coming from that background has really helped me now being in the legislature, because I know what it's like to walk into a room and have 100 residents, people spilling out of the door, wanting to talk to you directly and make their voices heard. So for me, I always come to the work with that perspective. And I think also like having a life outside of elected office is so important. And with all the work that we all do, right? Everybody here is on the ground, you're doing the work, you have the passion, but you've got to remember to just take care of yourself, know who you are. I think before you get into any type of public service work, you really have to know who you are at your core, and you do have to know your why. For me, it's about the people I represent. So I really stay rooted in my home community, Dearborn and Dearborn Heights. And I think we all do our best to do that, right? It's not just about Lansing. It's not just about the bubble. It's really about the people. And if you ran for any reason other than that, I think you're going to encounter some obstacles, because who you are and what you're about will be tested. I think there are, and I think what surprised me the most is that every day there are like little opportunities to kind of give away pieces of who you are. And you really have to be intentional about not doing that. You have to be intentional about holding on to who you are. And like I said earlier, finding your people really is everything. You can't operate as an island. I think that's true no matter what field you're in. I think it's especially true in public service. So that's what I would say.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Rip. Clerk Fellini, what surprised you most about the job?
Well, let me go back up, because I agree. Serving on a local level will humble you, because it is neighbor against neighbor, and it's not Democrat versus Republican. It's very independent thinking. And my surprise when I went to Lansing was how partisan it could become. And as clerk, I don't find it that way, because I try to stay out of that fray. But even when I was in Lansing, I'll never forget, and I told the story earlier, as a representative, the governor always gets their whipping boy that came out. It was Dick Posthumous, and he took me to the side. He says, "Tony," he says, "I got to talk to you." Yeah, Dick, what's up? He goes, "You only voted with the governor 85% of the time." Shit, I didn't think it was that good. I go, "I'm not even that good with my wife." So it's important that we keep our independent thinking. It's important that we stay to who we are and we know who we represent, because at the end of the day, when I go shopping in my local neighborhood, it's those people that count, not Lansing.
Senator Anthony, what surprised you most about your current role?
I represent Lansing. It counts though. Saying it. So I absolutely struggle with imposter syndrome, and I'm sure some of you do as well. It's that little voice in your head that despite how many degrees you get, how many accolades, how many atta girls that you get, that you're not enough, that you do not belong at the table, that you are going to say something silly, that you didn't wear the right thing, that you're just not enough. And even when I walk in the Capitol every day and I have a fancy office, nobody on the walls looks like me. They all look like you, kind of. A little bit. I mean, so in my office just feels like a space that doesn't belong to me, that I don't belong in these halls of power. And so it was surprising that despite having this fancy title and being the first Black and the first woman and all these other things, that I still struggle with that imposter syndrome. And so what I have been surprised by is that that doesn't go away. But what has also surprised me is that there are people that come in the office every day that seek to remind me that my voice isn't valuable and that the voices that I'm trying to uplift should not be elevated in the halls of power. So every day I have to remind myself that even when I get beat up, even when our friends tell us that it's not a worthy cause to lift up the voices of students and people of color and LGBTQ folks and folks who are not wealthy and well-connected, that I can suppress that imposter syndrome and show up as enough, not for myself, but for the people who sent me there. So that's honestly what surprised me, is my ability to kind of put my big girl panties on and actually do the work for you. So that's what's up, right?
Go ahead, Senator Moss.
Wow, some great answers. And what a great question. You have to always be cognizant in this role. If you want to be effective, if you want to represent your neighborhoods, then my first name is not state senator. My first name is Jeremy. And this is what I'm doing, but this is not who I am. I'm a neighbor. I'm a son. I'm a brother. I'm an uncle. I'm a community member first. And I think that's what it doesn't surprise me, but you cannot lose that. You cannot lose that inner core. And you know, we get flooded with emails, automatic emails. It's very easy to email us now. You know, you just click a button on your phone and then we get 1,500 emails on one issue. The most meaningful way for you to contact us is at our coffee hours, at our community conversations back home. We want to see you as much as you want to see us. And so those are the most meaningful relationships that we have, the people who we talk to, we engage with. Door knocking is great to get votes, but door knocking is also great to understand the issues that are going on in every neighborhood that you knock the doors in. So better connecting us as your neighbor, as your peer, as your community representative, not your state representative, I think is what's most important for us to keep true to who we are and to affect the most change.
Thanks. All right, AG Nessel, what has surprised you? This is the first time you've held elected office, right?
Technically second time, but yes.
Second time?
No, I was reelected.
Because you're reelected.
Yes, right.
But
No,
still,
but-
it's your first
but
office.
yes,
public
my
office that
first,
you've
right. It was the
held.
first time
We're
that I
both
ever
in
ran
the
for
same
anything.
boat in that
Right.
regard. So I'm curious, what has surprised you most about both your first and second terms as Attorney General?
I would say, well, people, you know, I agree with Representative Burns. I mean, they, you know, be authentic, but also maybe not too authentic, as it turns out. But I would say that, you know, that the only way that you can be successful in public office, whether again, it could be local level, it could be the county level, state, federal, what have you. I think you just have to have the things that you go there to do, that you say, here are the things I'm going to get done. Even if it's only a handful of things, I am determined to, you know, eye on the prize is getting these things done, things that will affect, you know, all Michiganders, all Americans, or everyone who lives in your community. And that you just know there are going to be obstacles in your way, obstacles sometimes that you can never predict. They might be obstacles. It might be not just, you know, another political party. It could be your own political party. It could be people who you would think would be natural supporters of whatever it is that you want to do, but they have maybe a little different agenda, or there's horse trading involved that you don't expect that you have to do. But at the end of the day, you know, there were lots of people who came before you, and there's going to be a whole lot of people that come after you. And you have this limited period of time to truly make a difference in the lives of those around you, and to always remind yourself of that, and to know that you do have the opportunity to make a significant difference in the lives of many, many other people, and to just be, you know, firmly rooted, like not to let yourself get distracted by everything else that's thrown at you. And at the end of the day, just to remember that when you are done serving in office, someone's life is going to be fundamentally changed because of the work that you did. And that's why you ran in the first place. And to keep thinking of that throughout the time that you serve.
Thank you. Thank you, AG Nessel. And thank you. Can we hear it? Give it up all to this great panel that we've had here today. Thank you, Rep. Burns, Clerk Forlini, Senator Anthony, Senator Moss, AG Nessel. Thank you for joining us today. You've got a lot more content coming your way, and even more opportunities for collaboration and planning in the day ahead. And so I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Reinhardt from our office to talk about our next steps. And again, let's give a hand to this great panel. Thank you.
And let's also have a round of applause for our amazing moderator, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. Thank you, everyone. Next, we will have our keynote address. We'll need just a few moments to set up.
Awesome.
All right, everyone. So we're going to move to our keynote address now. Again, I just want to give a round. Can we give a round of applause for our panelists one final time? That was an amazing session. All right. So I would like to welcome our keynote speaker to the stage. Needs no introduction, as you had just heard from him. And he has already been introduced, but I would like to welcome back to the stage State Senator Jeremy Moss for our keynote address.
All right, this is on. Thanks, Landon. So I am incredibly pleased to be able to talk about all that we've done in the legislature just in these last 9 months, items that many of you have fought for a long time, to be able to reduce these barriers to voting, to increase participation in our democratic process. There's so much that we could outline here today, and I'm going to try and do a brief overview. Because we are really in the center of what is going on in voting rights all across the country. One of the questions that was asked of the panel that I didn't get to answer is, why is youth turnout so engaged here in the state of Michigan as opposed to other places across the country? Why are we leading? Michigan is not boring. It's not boring, especially right now, which is a good thing. We are attracting so much attention from presidential candidates, from national legislative policies for a reason. And so in many regards, your vote truly makes a difference, because what goes on here in Michigan, it permeates across the country. And with these elections that are so close cycle after cycle, you have an amplified voice in this process. So harness it and lean into it. So again, I'm Jeremy Moss. That's my first name is Jeremy. I'm the state senator here in Oakland County, and I represent portions of Northwest Detroit. I actually represent the Auburn Hills portion of OU. And as mentioned earlier, I serve as president pro tem of the Michigan Senate. And I also chair the very, very busy Senate Elections and Ethics Committee. And I'm excited to talk to you about this work in this space that my colleagues and I in the Michigan legislature have done to usher in a historic new era of voter access here in our state. But first, I want to rewind a little bit, because I think in many regards, this journey on voter access started in a response to 2016. In 2018. There were pro-voter proposals on that 2018 ballot that were overwhelmingly supported. And I think were born out of a response of voter apathy in 2016 on both sides that led to very challenging circumstances in our country. First, in 2018, there was Proposal 2. That created an independent citizens redistricting commission that drew lines to create a legislature that is more reflective of the will of Michigan voters. The second proposal, Proposal 3 of 2018, instituted voting reforms that we've talked about today, like same-day registration and no reason absentee voting. That proposal, Proposal 3, was the winningest thing on the 2018 ballot. There was no other statewide candidate or proposal that received more support, with 66% of Michigan residents pushing forward this ease of access to voting. And who knew that as a result of 2018 and these proposals, that we would all be voting by absentee ballot in 2020, because it was the safest thing to do. And these proposals ended up being among the reasons that our democracy was able to survive through the multiple crises in 2020. I will also add there was a proposal in 2018 to legalize recreational marijuana. I think that helped our survival rate a little bit as well. But of course, then came the backlash with many truly voter suppressive tactics introduced in our legislature and then legislatures across the country, even in the Michigan Senate, where I served in that 2020 election cycle. All of those bills were vetoed, but set the stage for more voter access to be enshrined in our Constitution. And last year, I know many of you gathered together to collect signatures for Proposal 2 of last year. You talked with friends and family about the importance of voting, and then turned out in significant levels to support Promote the Vote, Proposal 2 of 2022. And again, a reminder, 60% supported that proposal. That's Democrats, Republicans, and independents who came together to reduce these barriers to voting. This must serve as a reminder, and if there's one takeaway, I hope it's this. Voting rights are popular. Voting rights in Michigan are popular, and it's fueled by the energy and passion that you and so many young people across our state have for expanding accessibility to the ballot box so that all Michiganders, no matter their race, no matter their age, their socioeconomic status, their station in life, can freely participate and make their voices heard. The richest person in our state and you have the same opportunity and the same vote behind the curtain on Election Day. By showing up here today and really taking that extra step to engage, you've demonstrated an understanding of how profoundly important this is to you and everyone, especially young people, to cast their vote. This new generation of voters knows all too well with the issues that are facing in our state and the impact that it has on your everyday life. As we see gun violence plague our schools and communities, as we see anti-LGBTQ voices take hold and hate crimes are on the rise, as we see the cost of college reach astronomical levels, there's no doubt that we need more young voters to bring a new perspective to this electoral process. I do not say that as a partisan. The statistics bear it out that young people just have a different take on some of these highly charged issues that are going to impact you and your future. And we've already seen this impressive call to action from young people here in the state of Michigan in recent elections. As was mentioned, in 2022, voters in Michigan age 18 through 29 turned out at a range of 37%. That is the highest in the country and 14 points higher than the national average. We can applaud that. And as a result, there is a majority in the legislature that is taking action on some of these issues. Again, I'm not here as a partisan. But when you have issues that you want to vote for, and then you have a legislature that delivers on those issues, that's the whole point of this process. And in this year, we've tackled on those issues. We've enacted common sense gun safety laws to keep firearms out of the hands of dangerous individuals. We've passed amendments to our state civil rights law to enshrine protections for LGBTQ Michiganders. We've made investments. We can applaud that. That was my bill, so we can definitely applaud that. We've made investments in our state budget to lower the cost of obtaining a post-secondary degree or skills certificate. And so that's the point of this whole process. You vote for things that you're passionate about, and you depend on those to deliver those items to you. But there's still more work to be done on these issues, and more work to be done to ensure all young people feel empowered to be heard in this process. And make sure that they have the ability to cast their ballot. So I want to talk about Proposal 2, because I have spent hours and hours living, breathing, eating, drinking, sleeping this ballot proposal to make sure that we have enacted it in the right way. And to achieve this reality, our election laws must meet this moment and provide greater power and flexibility in the hands of Michigan voters. Proposal 2, and our clerks will be the first to tell you this, Proposal 2 is the biggest change in how we vote in a generation here in the state of Michigan. With the passage of Proposal 2, which was a ballot proposal but required legislative enactment, we are writing a historic new chapter to voting here in Michigan, taking significant action to protect, uphold, and expand voting rights. My committee that I chair was charged with implementing this proposal to ensure our 83 county clerks and our 1,500 municipal clerks have uniform guidance on these new voting reforms. So at the start of this year, working alongside our Secretary of State, I convened a work group with her, our House Elections Chair, Penelope Cerniglo, election administrators at all levels and voting rights groups to draft the legislation to make it happen. And Governor Whitmer signed our bills into law over this past summer. So once implemented by our clerks and election officials next year, and many of them are actually piloting it in this current municipal election, I'll go down what Proposal 2 will achieve. Again, historic new ways for us to participate. First, and probably the biggest item here is, as I mentioned, the establishment of early voting. 20 other states, red states and blue states, provide opportunities for their citizens and qualified voters to vote on site, in person, before Election Day. Here in the state of Michigan, we are requiring at least 9 days of early voting before each statewide and federal election so that you can find a convenient time to vote that works in your schedule without facing obstacles like long lines on Election Day. It also authorizes, and this was a big part of this that we put into this work, the pre-processing and early tabulation of absentee ballots, ensuring a timely result after polls close on Election Day. I want to pause here because these things are game changers here in our country. Let's rewind to 2020. We knew that there was going to be this historic level of absentee participation because that was the way to vote in 2020, the safest way in the middle of a pandemic. But we only allowed our clerks to pre-process those ballots 1 day before Election Day. And by pre-processing, we allowed them to rip open the envelope and prepare them to run through the machine starting Election Day. So some 3.5 million absentee ballots were submitted, and they could only start to be fed into the tabulator on Election Day. It is a math formula. I did not take a lot of math classes in college, but those of you who might be, the math formula is how many ballots versus how much time it takes to process the ballots equals when we'll get our results. That's why our results lingered into the next morning after Election Day. Many of us sounded the early alarm, and I'm looking at our clerks. Our clerks sounded the early alarm. They wanted to join the 38 other states that allow for the early processing of those absentee ballots a week, 2 weeks before Election Day, so that we wouldn't have this lingering election administration burden on them. But the legislature at the time did not provide them that opportunity. And that's, I think, when some of the unique chaos out of Michigan permeated across the country, and we still have people pushing forward false narratives on what happened those wee hours after Election Day. So our bill, in addition to early voting, so allowing folks to vote early and not creating this backlog on Election Day, also allows for 8 days of processing of absentee ballots in communities with 5,000 residents and above before Election Day. So in Michigan in 2024, with early voting and the early processing of absentee ballots, we will hopefully lead the nation in publishing our election results. And all eyes will be on Michigan, and we will deliver. The additional items of this ballot proposal include expanding valid forms of identification by allowing you to use your student ID, U.S. passport, tribal photo ID, or military ID card to identify yourself when you show up to vote. It will ensure that the absentee ballot process is safe and secure by establishing a website for you to track your ballot. You will get information from your clerk on where your request for an absentee ballot is and when it comes to you, and where your ballot is and when it comes to you, and when it's received by the clerk, so that you have this confidence that your vote is counted. It will also save absentee voters time and money by requiring prepaid postage for all absentee ballot applications and envelopes. You don't have to search for the right stamp to put on your election mail anymore. It will expand access to drop boxes by allowing voters to return their absentee ballot safely and securely and conveniently, requiring secure drop boxes in every municipality, or at least one drop box for every 15,000 registered voters in municipalities that many registered voters with that many registered voters. It will simplify the absentee ballot request process by making it so you can fill out a single application. This was mentioned earlier in the program, to vote by mail and have that mailed that ballot mailed to you in all future elections without going through the hassle of extra paperwork, saving you that aggravation, that time, and that money. And then it will ensure that votes from our military members and overseas voters are counted, even if they are received, so long as they're postmarked by election day, but even if they're received up to 6 days after an election. Ultimately, this should lower the costs of elections all around. And while we see other states, as has been mentioned, putting up these barriers to voting, reducing access, limiting timeframes, putting voters through extra hoops, Michigan is prepared to stand out as a model in our country that upholds participation in the democratic process as sacred. We can be proud to be Michiganders. Looking ahead, there is still work to be done. All that has been signed into law and empowered by a ballot proposal that many of us supported and signed into law through the legislature and to the governor's desk. And as we wait for this to be implemented ahead of our next statewide election, the February presidential primary, our work in the legislature to preserve our democracy and create an electoral process that uplifts the voices of Michiganders continues. I know you saw a presentation earlier from what my Senate colleagues and I have introduced in the legislature to establish a Michigan Voting Rights Act, which will improve just about every aspect of our elections, ensuring voters are physically and legally protected and accommodated all throughout the voting process. This will give you and your fellow Michiganders more options to have a say in your governance, creating a future where generations of voters to come can cast their vote with ease and peace of mind. We have other items on the docket that we're moving through the legislature, including a ban on firearms at polling locations, including increased penalties for intimidating election workers, election volunteers. We want to create as much of a safe space for people to participate as possible. And all of these proposals will strengthen our state by allowing our government to be more representative of our many diverse and vibrant communities throughout Michigan, because when we all vote, we're all better for it. So our state's future depends on you. In order to achieve this bright and prosperous future, we all must fight for it every single day. We've seen what happens when the ideals of our democracy are not valued and not protected. And what happens when voter apathy takes over and we sit on the sidelines and we say, my vote doesn't matter. What could one vote difference make in an election? People then become cynical, and the chaos and confusion and conspiracies permeate and make up the political landscape. Our collective future is dependent on all of us, but especially the emerging generation, to stand up and be advocates for voting rights. Whether you help others register to vote, encourage your friends and family to cast their ballot, whether you sign up to work at the polls. I see nodding heads of clerks that want election workers as much as possible, or collect signatures for ballot proposals. Everything you do has an impact. You are catalysts for change. And I think we all have to remember voting rights secure all other rights. And you hold real power to turn the tides in our country away from politics you don't like and towards politics that we all would benefit from. Young people have been leading the evolution of our state and our country's ideological and political values for the better in every era of our nation's history. And I know it will be yours that will continue to do so. It really does give me a lot of hope that you've taken out your day to come here, to listen, to engage, to participate, to have takeaways, to produce outcomes, because you are clearly not just ready to head to the ballot box, but to jump headfirst into the political and policymaking arena. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all today on this important issue, and I'm looking forward to working with you as we continue to build a new era of voter access and accountability for a new generation of Michigan voters. Thank you so much.
All righty, everyone. We're going to get started on the topic of pre-registration and high school engagement. My name is Rose Riley. I'm a student at the University of Michigan, where I do voter engagement work there. And then in my free time, I also do it at all of the high schools in Washtenaw County with the League of Women Voters. And I'm really excited to be joined today by two wonderful panelists. I'll let you both introduce yourselves. Yeah, maybe Michelle, if you would go ahead and go first.
Sure. Hi, I'm Michelle Cantor Cohen. I am the policy director at Fair Election Center, home of the Campus Vote Project. And I'm excited to be here.
Oh, there we go. Perfect. All right. My name is Abdullah Ojanabi. I'm the Collegiate Student Advisory Task Force member with the Secretary of State. And I'm also a Campus Vote Project Fellow. I go to Macomb Community College, so I'm representing the body of Macomb Community College. But fun fact, I also attend high school, so this topic is going to be very important to me. I'm a senior in high school. I just turned 17. So if this bill were to happen, this would have a significant impact on my life. So.
Cool. All right. So we're going to get started on our first question, but here's a little background context. The Michigan legislature is considering a bill that would allow young people to pre-register to vote when they're 16. Currently, they have to wait until they're 17 and a half years old and then turn 18 by election day. Michelle, I was wondering if you could give us a little bit more of an in-depth policy description of this. And then for both of you guys, do you think that this will have a large impact for young people?
Yeah, absolutely. So just first of all, when we're talking about pre-registration, it's a process that allows people who are otherwise eligible other than age to vote, to fill out a registration, and then when they turn 18, become automatically added to the voter rolls based on their pre-registration application. And that's great for a lot of reasons. Some of them are, first of all, really focused on meeting people where they are. And that includes in high schools specifically, as we were here to talk about, because of course, many high school students are not, this probably goes without saying, but are not 17 and a half, right? And so when you're reaching high school students now, you're really talking about seniors for the most part. But there's so many more opportunities to reach a much larger portion of the student body when you're talking about 16, 17-year-olds as well. And so that's really important. I can say more about that maybe later in terms of the details of why and how in high schools and in the community. But the second aspect of reaching people where they are is as I think was mentioned this morning, when you're talking about getting driver's licenses, there are people who are not going back to the driver's license offices between age 16 and 21 because they got their permit or license or whatever, that document, and they don't need to come back. And through the process that has actually been around for decades of having what a lot of folks refer to as motor voter, but being able to register to vote through DMV. So you're missing people, right, that are getting their license. Otherwise, so it's a missed opportunity if you don't have pre-registration. So those are two ways of that pre-registration can really help us meet young people where they are.
Yeah, I think from the high school perspective, so 16-year-olds are generally juniors. And when I was a junior, which was not a long time ago, I remember being asked at the college level, because I started college when I was 15. I remember being asked at the college level, are you registered to vote? And my biggest answer was, no, I can't right now. I'm not allowed. But I was kind of disappointed saying that. I felt that there was a burden involved, and that should not be the case. And I feel with this bill being passed, hopefully it can correct a massive problem that hopefully can bring more high school students involved and eventually get them to vote once they're 18. So, we were just talking about this in the breakout sessions. 16-year-olds are permitted to get a driver's license. That's a big responsibility. That is not easy whatsoever. And so I think if we can compare that to pre-registration, there isn't much comparison. I think a driver's license will outweigh that. So if we can involve, or if we can just add it in general, that would create another commitment to high school students to become more mature and become younger adults that they are but they can fully develop into. And, you know, just from my perspective, I wish this would have passed last year because I would have said yes to that answer. But I think regardless, if it can pass, from my work as a Campus Vote Project fellow, I can encourage more students to look forward into voting and beyond just voting, but getting engaged civic and with their civic duties. So.
Excellent. Michelle, this is a question specifically for you. How common is pre-registration across the country? And are states generally moving to expand or reduce this opportunity for young people?
Yeah, thanks. Right now, about 20 states have some form of pre-registration that allows 16 or 17-year-olds to pre-register. More of those are 16 and up, and then there are a few that are just 17 and up. And I wrote down some examples because I think it's just interesting. So some of the states that allow 16-year-old pre-registration are Colorado, Florida, Louisiana, Maryland, Minnesota, Utah, North Carolina. So it's really a very interesting, like, broad range of states. And that's not all of them, of course, but just wanted to like throw out that sample because I think it is interesting. And then West Virginia and Nevada are just some examples of states where people can pre-register at 17. And this is growing. So Minnesota just passed this not even last year. I think it was this past summer. And so this is an area that's growing. And actually, in terms of being able to pre-register before age 18, something that started in the 70s. So this is not really new. It's definitely been expanded since around 2007 or so. But actually, Florida and Hawaii have had pre-registration policies of some kind or another for decades.
Really interesting, and interesting how it doesn't necessarily go along party lines in the way that we might anticipate.
Not at all. And actually, pre-registration, there's been some empirical studies on pre-registration and the impact, and have really found that it cuts across party, gender, race, and it's opening up the process for all young people.
That's really amazing. Awesome. So now a question for both of you. Maybe we can start with Abdullah. How would high school voter registration change if young people were able to pre-register at 16?
Yeah, so I kind of want to switch the perspective a little bit. Let's imagine the curriculum right now and how it would change if we were to evolve, or if we were just to add pre-registration. More students would be more inclined to learn about civic engagement, political science, and it would be much more of an incentive for them to understand the system of our democracy. Therefore, I think it would not also just include pre-registration, it would include them to go above and beyond with their civic duties. But as far as the impact, I believe students will be more inclined with their state representatives, with their local government. They'll probably go to local government meetings and hopefully get involved, raise their questions, and make sure that whatever they feel is on their mind is actually being spoken, because their voice is not just a vote. It's an opinion that should never go without any regards. It should be accounted. Therefore, I think pre-registration is a great way to start with it.
So sort of two buckets of things. And one thing is that it addresses a real information gap and an administrative barrier. So we know, and thinking kind of about Mythbusters, we know in surveys that similar percentages of older voters and younger voters are interested in voting. And younger citizens who are disproportionately more likely not to be registered in surveys are saying that they're they didn't know what the process was. They didn't understand the process. They didn't know what the deadline was. And so the policy is really around removing those barriers and connecting the interest with the information and the opportunity to be registered and vote. From an organizing perspective, pre-registration is really important because for one thing, just doing high school voter registration, both from the community perspective, from the perspective of being able to have a clerk come into the high school and do that work, or the League of Women Voters, I know like all over the country and here too, does high school registration work, but being able to reach more of those students, all school assemblies, things like that, really being able to have conversations in the classroom and, not being concerned of like, oh, there's only, 20 18-year-olds do today instead of like all of these people from ages 16 to 18 that could get the process started.
Yeah, if I might add a little bit, Michelle, what you were saying about from an organizing perspective, in my experience working in high schools is so true. We have spent years trying to calibrate the particular dates that we should go to miss AP testing, but try and get the most 17-and-a-half-year-olds and, try and get them before they're totally checked out as seniors and ready to do graduation and prom. And so it's a real logistical barrier to try and find the right time to go into schools. If that logistic barrier was opened way up to getting anyone who is 16 and up, we could go in at virtually any time during the senior year. We could go in multiple times and have that kind of opportunity to speak to a larger group.
And then I could also add outside and community events. You're also just reaching more people. There are organizations that I work with. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Headcount, but they do Headcount. Yeah, they do civic engagement and voter registration at concerts. They're a national organization, and they have volunteers all over the country that do voter registration, and then get people information after that once they're on the getting emails and texts and stuff. So yeah, concerts, influencers, events, things like that. I know their driving points is meeting people where they are, and they're at concerts and events. And so, if people can be pre-registered at those events, then you're reaching them.
Great point. Abdullah, this question is specifically for you. As someone who is yet to turn 18, what would pre-registration mean to you and your peers?
So pre-registration it's a fascinating topic because I'm politically involved, but I think for the student who's not politically involved, they would become politically involved because it sets them up for it. As a student right now in high school, I love commitments. I love initiatives, and I believe it will be an initiative to add on my calendar if pre-registration were to be passed, because anything that involves students to go out there and share their opinion, it's fascinating because it brings students to become leaders, and it brings students to understand that they have a voice that should be said, that should be spoken of. And I believe the greatest way to approach this is through a civic process, which hopefully can bring them to vote. There's no other way that students can understand that they have a greater voice than them actually going out and voting. Therefore, it would not only bring them to vote, but it will actually bring them to volunteer in their communities to speak about their opinions. For me, it would elevate that experience much more than what I'm just doing right now. It would actually get me to vote and share with my peers, share with my family members that, hey, I may be 17 or 17 and a half, but I'm going out there and voting. And if you're 16, you can do it as well because your voice matters. So.
That's great. The last question that I have specifically for you guys before we turn to questions from the audience is, if you had to share one thing with legislatures considering their vote on this legislation, what would that one thing be?
I think I'd go back to the theme of meeting people where they are to increase access. For all the reasons that I was talking about.
Yeah, I would probably say I would wish for them to consider how things have changed over the years. I would wish for them to consider that things are not the same as they were 20, 30 years ago. And though this was a very early process in our history, registration is not a very new thing. Right now in today's society, social media is a big factor. And I think if we can plug social media into pre-registration, that would bring more youth involvement. I would love for legislatures at the higher level to consider how things have changed, and the hypocrisy of students not being involved is really not the case, because they actually want to become heard. They actually want to participate and hopefully represent themselves because they have that power to do so. And if they can exercise their right to vote, that's a great start to it.
Amazing. All righty. We're now open to questions from the audience if anyone has any at this time. Should they use the QR code function? Wonderful. Oh, they should use a mic? Okay, got it. All right, we'll pass a mic around. Looks like Laura has a question. Yeah.
Wow, there's people
I think we can hear you.
They won't hear you unless it's not virtual.
Yeah, I don't want this to sound like I'm anti-immigrant, but I am concerned about automatic registration where it could be that a non-citizen got indirectly registered to vote, which, and the reason I ask it is, I'm more worried about the repercussions of them being registered illegally through no fault of their own. Is that something that's being addressed in these?
So specifically for pre-registration, it doesn't change anything about the verification processes that the county clerks already go through. And it doesn't really, it doesn't change anything about automatic voter registration. It's really just the age issue. So you still have to be eligible in all the same ways with, if it's a DMV, and the same documents you have to show for your driver's license. This is really just about the voting, the registration age.
The ability to
register.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure this question really applied here, but I thought without asking it, I wouldn't know.
Sure. Happy to address.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I thought it was really interesting what you guys were saying about like 16-year-olds, because I'm 16, and like for sure what you said about like how people, there's no like really apathy, like people are definitely involved and like have opinions about political issues and want to get involved. But like a lot of my peers I noticed sort of like have this like mindset that it's like, well, like I think this, but like nobody really cares what I think. So sort of how do we like on like a local level or on a state level sort of like change like the mindset of like students that it's like, oh, well, all the old people in the legislature like don't want to hear my opinion. And then in doing that, how do we get like people who like aren't old enough to register to vote to like actually support and push pre-registration?
I can start. I have so much anecdotal experiences with people telling me that. In fact, one of my neighbors was telling me I shouldn't vote. That doesn't matter. I'm just one person. But that's actually not the case. It's not you just voting. It's about you just voicing your opinion. But in regards to, being a young individual and thinking of it from that perspective, that this is not going to outweigh anything, think about the education that's going to be involved if we have pre-registration. Think about how students are going to be educated to know that their vote actually does matter, and it's counterintuitive of what other students are thinking. I think the curriculum factor will be seamless if we can add pre-registration, because it would enforce the curriculum to become more engaged with students, understanding political science, understanding history, and understanding their exercise to vote. So I think education will take it to another step.
And it goes both ways, right? That some of the studies have shown that actually coupling the civic engagement with the pre-registration opportunity is what's most effective. So, and they really kind of feed off each other, because you can, it's sort of like show versus tell, right? I mean, you can tell somebody that, oh, well, when you turn 18, you can vote, or you can teach them how to register and get them pre-registered. And it's an active process and not so much a passive process. So that's part of it. And then to your question about how we can get legislators to approach it, I think the way they can show that they care about what people think, one of them is to pass pre-registration and show students that, and show young people that, yeah, we're excited to have these newest voters in our community and in the electorate as they turn 18.
Yeah, if I might add a little bit to this, I'm 21, so it wasn't a million years ago that I was also 16. And I remember being 16 and not being able to register to vote. And, I was already kind of a politically interested kid, probably reading, way more news than your average 16-year-old. I was so excited to vote. And the only thing that I could do kind of to start getting there is to help other people register to vote. And so I started running voter registration drives at my high school. And that was like a really cool way to get engaged. But it's a particular kind of kid who's going to look at that system and go, oh, here's what I can do, is I can be a poll worker and help kids register to vote. But for all of those other kids who are like, they're interested, but they feel discluded, this is a really great way to get them moving. Yeah.
I feel like I was kind of the other kid in that. So I had a friend, acquaintance, whatever, that was really involved in some environmental initiatives in high school. I think I was probably 16. And I would look at it and go, well, I can't make a difference. Like, I guess I was just kind of cynical. And I was like, I can't make a difference. Like, there's nothing I can do about this. Like, they're just, this is not something I can do anything about. And looking back now, I like wish I'd gotten involved as a student and wish I'd kind of like, been part of that. But I think if I'd been able to like actually be, have my voice heard more, I might have been like, oh, I can actually have an impact. So I feel like I was kind of in that, that other group at that age. So
I think pre-registration would enhance students professionally to understand that they can take an initiative. And just like how you were, I think students will become more of that. They will have more of a side to them that involves around eagerness, that involves around taking initiatives, that becomes around taking responsibility, because pre-registration is a responsibility. Students will have to go and do something to get it. But if you can do the same thing with your driver's license, you can do the same exact thing with your pre-registration. So.
And there's also kind of the long view of, a lot of studies have shown repeatedly that voting is habit forming. Non-voting is also habit forming, unfortunately. And so the earlier that we can be participating and that young people participate, the more they will continue to do so and to have that impact and have their voice heard throughout their, time anywhere, like throughout their life. So that's another aspect of this. It's not just what's in the immediate future, but also, looking at the long term.
Yeah, that's a great point. Did we have another question?
Several.
Okay.
I actually have two questions, if you'll allow me. First one, all three of you have spoken about the advantages and your support for doing it. Are there any disadvantages? Are there people out there who are opposing it, and what arguments would they be using?
I can talk a little Mythbusters. So one thing that people who don't support pre-registration sometimes say is that, young people are just going to move. They're going to graduate and they're going to go somewhere else. So two things on that. One, that the studies have shown that actually people who are pre-registrants stay on the rolls about as much as people who are not pre-registrants, who are registered, when they turned 18. And obviously people do move, people of all ages move, right? And then another thing is that the process to do an update of your registration is much easier than it is to just to do an initial registration. So even if and when people do move, the fact that they're already on the list provides, the opportunity to, it's less of a barrier. They can do updates. They can also get election mail because, people don't get, that gets forwarded in many circumstances. And campaigns are reaching out to people who are registered. They don't, I don't think there's probably very many campaigns, nonpartisan or otherwise, that have the ability to reach out to every single human, right? It's not worth the money. So people, are often only sending information, including election information. It's just where to vote, your precinct, to people who are registered. So even if there is an address update process involved, it's still easier and more accessible.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Do you have a second one?
I do. I think Michelle may have just answered it. And my second question was, if someone pre-registers, would that be a matter of public record that would be available, publicly disclosed by the clerk to anybody who asks?
So I would have to be honest with you, I'd have to look at the specific bill to see what this one says on that. I know in many states there is a specific provision related to records that protects information of minors. I don't actually have in front of me the bill text right now, but that, it's a good question. And a lot of states do put protections in for that purpose.
Go for it.
Okay, thank you. I have a question about young people wanting to have their thoughts and questions heard. Being registered is, to me, a one-way street. Having the electorate and the people of the Michigan, people who are involved with voting, reaching out to people to be registered to vote. But how do you, as people in the electorate area, hear what they have to say, hear their concerns, their questions,
Well, I think it's not a tangible thing to do, because when you're 16 or you're 17, you don't have, well, you're still not voting, you're pre-registering. But it's a factor that comes with pre-registering that gets students to become interested, to where their questions can be raised and they can possibly email their state representative, or they can email their local government and ask about it, so they can make an informed decision when they actually do vote. And that's a benefit of pre-registration. It gives someone who is 16 2 years to do research, to consider it, to give themselves free time. Instead of just being 17 and a half, you only have half a year, and you're already so developed with your schedule and you're so busy as a young adult. I don't believe there will be enough time conducive that can bring students to be fully developed in their research. So when you're 16 or you're 17, you have that time to ask as many questions that won't be listed until you are fully convinced of what you're going to register for or who you're going to register for.
I'm losing my train of thought a bit though, so I'm sorry. Level set me where.
You know, something that you said at the last question was this idea of now you're ready to be reached out to, something that like what I think about if I was registered at 16, I would have been more obviously connected to the people I was going to vote for when I was 18. So because of my pre-registration, because I was an engaged voter doing the work to try and learn more about the candidates, I could have gone to a candidate and said, look, you know, I'm not eligible to vote in your current election, but I will be voting for you when you're up for re-election, and here are the issues that I care about. And it would have given me more confidence in that particular situation.
Yeah, and I think it goes the other way too, that legislators and other elected officials are most interested in what the voters who are going to vote for them or not vote for them are thinking about. And so if you know that you have a population of people that is about to become eligible to vote and going to vote, you know, the more predictive thing of whether someone's going to vote is, are they registered or are they not registered? I mean, registration is a prerequisite. Of course, now we have same day registration, but it's still people who are already registered are more likely to vote than people who are not already registered. And legislators, other electeds know that, and are going to listen to people who have the potential to change whether they're in office. But that is part of, you know, I think someone was speaking this morning about accountability. Right. And that goes to that issue too of being part of holding elected officials accountable.
Alrighty, that's all the time that we have for this particular session. We're going to be transitioning into our next session now. But thank you so much for the really thoughtful questions, and thank you so much to our wonderful panelists for their expertise.
Hi, I'm Laura Dudgeon from the Dearborn Heights League of Women Voters. And I've been really fortunate to work, and right now I'm the chair of our local high school voter registration. And I choose to call it high school registration as opposed to youth, as I think that they should be considered young adults at this point. And with this high school voter registration program, we've been partners with Access. The League and Access have been doing it in Dearborn Heights since 2012. And I know before the pandemic, we had already registered over 6,000 students. So it's a very successful program. And I have a lot to thank for the predecessors who created it. Betsy Cushman was one of the creators of our program, and it continues to evolve with just like the voting rights. We here all know who the League of Women Voters are, but the high school students don't. So we introduce ourselves and let them know that that our organization started the year that the women got the right to vote, and that we've continued strong with this to educate and encourage voting And since when the League of Women Voters didn't know what to do with their vote, once they got it, they all got together and learned what was on the ballots, learned how to make their voice count, and you're doing it strong over 100 years later. So that's why we're here. Our partners in Dearborn Heights is our Access, and it's the Arab Community of Economic and Social Services. It's a wonderful organization that started in Dearborn in a storefront in the 70s, and it has grown to be the largest in the nation for Arab American Economic Social Services. They are like the League. They aren't limited just to the League isn't limited to women. The Access is not limited to Arab Americans. They help everyone. So we've got a wonderful partnership with them. And we usually go through and start with the telling them how to register, about absentee voting, and we all know all that right now. And we do stress that the politicians work for us. They are our voice, and we're the ones that put them there. We have this wonderful pamphlet that we share with them. It's a who's who. It has all your elected officials. It's got their addresses, their emails, their phone numbers. And ours is local, but it goes all the way up to the president. So anyone here could, I'd be happy to share a copy of it with, because the state and the federal officials are the same. It also shows their salaries. And we stress that because they work for us, we're paying those salaries. So through the registration process, who can vote, who can, these are all important issues that we would discuss with the students. But our fun part is, I'm just going to shoot through the normal things. Voting in person, applicable IDs, you have the rights. Oh, I went through the whole thing, but during that part, what we do is we ask this, we go into it. Well, it's taken us a long time to get to this point, but we start with the administrations, building the rapport with the superintendents, the principals, and our best, the way we can connect with the most students is if we can get into their high school English classes or language arts. It's where all the seniors have to take that class. So that's a way for us to meet the most. Some schools aren't there. Most of them we've gotten to that point, but some schools we're still meeting in an auditorium or a cafeteria. But in any way we can reach them, that's what we'll accept. And it was mentioned earlier, the scheduling is hard because we do want to do it in the spring, but that's between spring break, AP testing, we actually scheduled one for a senior skip day. So there's a lot of pitfalls. Oh, and the other thing that we've started doing is including students, recruiting students to do this slideshow presentation. So part of the scheduling is to meet with students that volunteer, train them on the slideshow. We give them a sample script to look at and outlines for them to cover it. And we also train adult volunteers to assist with the students, and then the scheduling of the classes. So there's a lot of scheduling involved. And but the students that are help us out, that volunteer and do these presentations, are wonderful, and they basically connect better with them than a bunch of us older people. But so when we're doing the presentation, we ask, what issues are important to you? And we take a random sample. Like, what's important to you? What issue is really hot topic right now? Okay. Education. And pardon me? Women's rights, climate change, gun rights, immigration. Okay, we've got 5. That's what we do, is we take 5. Every classroom is different. Every school is different. There's no two alike. Okay, now y'all have little stickers, orange and green. I want you to come up here and vote for which one. Put your first choice is the green, and your second choice of what you think is the most important topic here. The green is your first choice. Green is go, and then orange is your second choice. And the classrooms do this. Oh yeah, we will. We'll have a little bit of time. So it looks like the most first choices were for women's rights, but education is really overwhelmingly took the most votes. And you're not limited to one preference. And we pointed out to show the students, see what you can do collectively when you vote. If you don't vote, who's going to pay attention? Who's going to care about education if you're not there to vote for it or to elect the officials that will choose for you? So this is a great visual. It's a great way to engage the students. It gets their attention and they feel that they've participated. It's the first step in voting. We also tell them that not only do your vote counts, but contact your officials. The more of you that contact, whether it's a state rep or it's a city council person, the more that reach out, the more they're going to take notice to what you have to say. School board, yes, yeah, any elect, and they're in here. School board, for our. Well, yeah. Yeah, yes, but we want, and we tell them they want to hear from you. They want to know what's important. The other thing I tell them too is, especially now, when I'm a senior and I'm part of the baby boomers, and we were the biggest voting bloc. And when we were the youngest voting bloc, we changed the voting age from 21 to 18. We ended a war in Vietnam. And we realized that our vote mattered, and we continued to vote, and we were the biggest voting bloc, and the ones who showed up all the time. They're listening to Social Security. They should be listening to climate change too right now. And it's you as the biggest voting bloc now that's going to make the difference.
Thanks for that, Laura. Yeah, so in Washtenaw County, we run a similar program to the program that Laura described. We try to go to every high school in the county. And then a layer that we've added is this idea of having student leaders of voter services. So we seek out a student or a few students at each high school, bring them into the League of Women Voters as members, give them election law training so that they're able to advise their peers a little bit on how to register, all the different ways that they can vote, and other ways that they can get civically engaged outside of the voting process. So we bring those students in, give them that training, and kind of give them a toolkit that gets them to a point where they can help run the voter registration drives at their high school. Like Laura was saying, having them do the slide deck, having them present statistics about, this is the percentage of folks of our age group who vote in this county, or, people like me, people like you are voting, that really elicits a reaction. For educators and for anyone that's interested in the audience, the Circle group at Tufts University does a lot of really good research on the ways that young voters are motivated. And something they've identified is that peer-to-peer interaction is always way more effective at getting students to register and then getting them to turn out. And so being able to give the students the toolkit so that they can go out and be the mobilizers is something that has been really helpful in Washtenaw County and is something that's backed by a lot of research. So if you search up Circle Tufts University, youth voter engagement, you're going to find a website that has a whole litany of excellent empirical research. And then also they have this kind of write up of a bunch of ways that you can implement it into curriculum. So it's a really helpful a resource for high school. And also we use it a lot at the college level too. So kind of based on that research, based off our anecdotal experience of going in to schools, and all of a sudden when I, as the little 19-year-old, started doing the presentation and they responded in a completely different way than they responded to other members of the league, we realized that we could mobilize that even better by getting them someone who is in their high school, someone that they know, someone that they might play on the same sports team with or sit at the same lunch table to tell them that voting is important. That is a whole different message. So that's kind of where we base our work in. And it's been pretty successful. We register thousands of students each year. But, as we were talking about in the last presentation, the long-term goal is that we wouldn't have to go out and register that aggressively. We'd really like those students to be able to pre-register when they're getting their driver's license. And we'd like to come in and follow up with the mobilizing education to connect that registration, help folks who need to register still, but connect that then to turning out to vote and getting them the resources they need, like vote411.org, to provide them with educational resources so that they feel confident as voters. So that's a little bit about what we do in Washtenaw County. Now, if everyone's happy with it, we'll take some time for questions. We've got until 3, and I'm sure both Laura and I are happy to answer any questions about the work that we do. And there's members of the audience who do this work as well, so they can maybe give us some input as well. But yeah, any questions?
I'm gonna bring you a mic.
She's gonna bring you a mic.
We got an audience online.
Thank you.
When you do this with the high school students, is it like when they're 17 and then they're about to be 18? Okay, because I was saying at the table that like I have worked for advanced micro targeting, and they sign people up to vote, like if you need to vote. So a lot of times, like when you're down at Wayne State, because I'm from Wayne State, you can like stand in certain areas. They kind of let me. A lot of those college students, I'm just saying for college, they don't know that when they turn 18, they're automatically able to be voters. Like, when you go to Secretary of State, they ask, would you like your voter's registration? So some of them, everybody's a little, you just turned 18. I know how that is. So I was thinking like high school is good, but for some of the college students too, like that, is that what you're doing? Like kind of going for high school, reminding them of it?
Yeah, so in Washtenaw County specifically, we we try to tell folks as they're graduating from high school that even if you're moving on or moving to a different place in college, registering right now is a great first step. One, it gives them a voter registration to fall back on. If they get to college, don't think about it until like 2 weeks before the election. They can call mom and dad. Mom and dad could come pick them up and take them home to their precinct. And so that's a really helpful resource. It also helps them familiarize with the process. If they've registered once, and they've been shown how to do it through a presentation like the one Laura showed us, they know what the michigan.gov/vote website looks like. They know that's where they need to go to register, even if they're going to a different state. It's kind of keyed into their mind that, oh, yeah, voter registration is a thing, and I need to do that ahead of time. And it's a process I might want to get support on. And oh, the League of Women Voters helped me with this before. I can Google League of Women Voters voter registration and find resources. So kind of catching them before they move off and disperse throughout the world when they're a senior in high school has been really valuable.
And when we go into the high schools, we prefer to do it in the spring where we're going to get more eligible students that are just 18 or soon to be 18 that would help them register. We've gone in the fall and it's not as successful as going in the spring. It's that just much. And we also tell them about the wonderful website that the league has, Vote 411. We stress that a lot. We mention it more than once throughout our presentation because it's a way for them to make an informed vote. The league does a lot of research on what's going on, what's on the ballot, who's on the ballot, and they put it out there on their website. We print out voters guides in a nonpartisan. We never tell you how to vote. We just tell you we want you to vote.
Point. Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm in the Wall Lake school system, and the students get up and talk just about at every board meeting. There was one about 2 or 3 months ago. They had 15 LGBTQ students get up and talk, and it was just phenomenal. And we go out. I haven't been part of it because I'm a newer member of these groups, these local groups, but they do go to the high schools and try to get the kids to register to vote. The one thing they don't do, and I know it's supposed to be nonpartisan, which is right, is say, okay, here's the phone number for the local Republican group. Here's the local phone number for the local Democratic group. You know, whatever your leanings are, but let them make, because I'm in one of those groups, and most of us are in wheelchairs and walkers, and we don't have young people, and we need young people in those groups. Indivisible, Huron Valley Indivisible, which is nonpartisan. You know, we're all a bunch of old birds there, and we need the young people to come. And so when we register those kids to vote, make sure that they understand that there are these outlets that they can go to and choose from, you know, whatever your leanings are.
Yeah, so in Washtenaw County, part of our work has been trying to diversify the age group of the League of Women Voters too, by bringing in young students, because, you know, I was the youngest person in Washtenaw County's league for quite a few years. And so now I am not. Now I'm like maybe more in the median because of all of these new members, which is really cool. And so, yeah, there's definitely something to be said there about getting young people engaged in these non-governmental groups. You know, my work is totally in the nonpartisan sector, but I have found that students are really excited about getting engaged. Michelle, you had a comment. I want to run and bring you the mic.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I just wanted to add that we're talking about people moving again, and that there are obviously many people who are not college bound, and that reaching folks who are not college bound in high schools is really important, and they're probably less likely to be, you know, moving right afterwards and going you know, to a different jurisdiction or something. So it's an important population. Obviously, this is college student voting summit, but like we also need to think about, folks who are not college bound.
That's a really great point. Thought there was another question in the middle there.
Should I stand? I feel like I'm a contestant. I want to go back to scheduling and organizing. As Laura, I think you mentioned that you try to get into the senior English class, which I found interesting. Why not a government class or social studies class? And secondly, it's been a long time since I've been in high school, but don't they have organizational fairs and days where you could set up, maybe that's not the best time to do a presentation, but do you go back for those sorts of things?
No, we don't go back. It's just, we handle 10 schools, 10 high schools, and that would be 10 groups of students that are going to do the presentations. That's training them. That's getting the schools scheduled. It's if we had a lot more volunteers, we might be able to do more, but it's not really feasible with the amount of time. Now, why we don't go into government classes? A lot of those students are taking their government classes in 9th and 10th grade. And so by the 12th grade, that's the one thing about the Michigan curriculum, they have to take a language arts class every year. So we hit the senior one, and we're going to get more of the eligible students in those classes. So that's why we've focused on that. And actually most of our schools have conformed to that because we keep begging for it. And they do hold the League of Women Voters and Access in high regard. And I don't want to tarnish any of that for any reason. So yeah.
I want to add that it's so different for every single school. In Washtenaw County, we probably go to a different type of thing in almost every single school. So there are schools that the best way to reach seniors is to go to the library and have each class or each teacher send down seniors at certain times. There are schools where the best way to reach them is to go to every English class because all of the seniors are in the same English class. We have one school where we go to one teacher who sees every senior at some point through his schedule in the day. So it's really a question of going into that school and asking them how you can best serve them. If you're an external partner, if you're a student, you know the environment of your school best, and you can tell external partners like the league or school administrators what is the best way to reach students, because it also changes from year to year, and the students and the teachers really know what that looks like. I'm sorry, you had a question.
No, you piggybacking what you just said, I think every school is different.
Yes.
And there are 2 schools in the Grosse Pointe area, what I represent, League of Women Voters there. We have gone to the library, and we've got a wonderful library, and come on down and we get the students. Another high school that we're involved in, as soon as the high school seniors know what college they're going to, they're very pumped, they're very excited. We have a little cookie there in the shape of a star, hey, now you're going to go to college. Where are you going to go? How about registering to vote? Where are you going to be? The campus. So that's another way. I love the idea about the English class, and maybe we'll do that because I love presentations. You have a captive audience, but we found that high school senior day works, but also the library as well. So great presentation, ladies. Keep on doing it.
There are some schools, there's a couple of schools that are so large, we actually schedule 2 days of 5 classes each of that high school English. So there's a lot involved with the scheduling. And we do the, we also do the cafeterias. We've done libraries, we've done study halls, auditoriums, but I think our biggest success is when we can get into the language arts classes.
Yeah. We're wrapping up on time. Do you want to have one quick question? Get you a mic real quick. There you go.
Thank you. Moving forward, if pre-registration becomes the thing, and we're now going into the high schools to reach the 16-year-olds, and Laura, you're training these 16-year-olds to do that. Have you thought about any follow-up to help them?
I would still focus on the seniors because the 16-year-olds are still not going to be able to vote for 2 more years. That's my personal opinion.
And then you had a question over here I want to make sure we still get to.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, and I'm typically an out-of-the-box thinker. Has anyone or any of the League of Women Voter chapters, has any group attempted to have a voters registration summit or off campus, off school grounds?
So I don't think Sarah Reinhardt is in here, but the Department of State had a high school kind of group that they were calling My Vote Matters that was doing something similar to that. We find that, like, as you can see today, I think we've got like 1 or 2 or maybe 3 high schoolers in here. It's hard when it's on a school day. Like I get that. It's really hard to access high schoolers. One thing that we're doing in Washtenaw County is we're going into the neutral zone, which is like a place where youth kind of congregate in Washtenaw County. If you can find those places, kind of meet them where they're at, I think that makes a lot of sense, because sometimes at school might not be the place to reach them. And, you know, finding those community access points and then connecting with more local students that way can be really helpful. But that's a great point.
Yeah, I was just wondering how supportive would superintendents or administrators be with scheduling a senior day off campus to, you know, support those students with getting registered to vote and those things.
Yeah, great idea. I think the state level, the Department of State has done some work there.
And I do know that the Department of State is going to actually work with the Department of Education on promoting the registration process. So it's a wonderful idea, and the league does have they do participate in voter registration drives at various times. And September there was the National Voter Registration Day. The colleges, a lot of times we've asked to get into the colleges. Sometimes we're successful. Sometimes they have their own on-campus group that does it. So it like it was said earlier, every classroom, every school has its own workings. You know, it differs from one to the next.
I want to recognize that we're nearing time, and I just want to offer myself. I'm Rose Riley, and I'm going to be around for the rest of the day. If any of you guys high school age are interested, especially if any of you are in Washtenaw County, I don't think any of you are. I'm always recruiting for our student leaders for voter services, but I'm also happy to connect you guys with some resources too, and we can talk league-wise if there are people who are available to come into your school and support that work, because it can be hard as a student to start it off. I was helped by someone who is a member of the League of Women Voters who trained me to begin. And so if we can provide that to you, I want to make sure you know that that's a resource. Any last thoughts?
No, I appreciate y'all listening to us, and I'm always open to suggestions. We're like the voting rights. We are always evolving. If you have any ideas for me, I would love to hear from you.
Thanks, everybody.
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? Testing. All righty. I know there's folks coming in and out. First off, thank you, everyone who's still here. How were the breakout sessions? Good. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Awesome. Okay. Good. Well, I don't want to pontificate much longer. I just want to say this day has given me a lot of hope for the future. You might have been hearing that from a lot of people, but I just want you to hear from me too. Everyone that's in the breakouts downstairs, those of you who are here, you're just being here means a lot. So this session, we have two very special guests. I want to introduce both of them. The goal will be to kind of go over some of the nuts and bolts of voting and how a polling location, the voting experience from early voting to voting on election day impacts you as students and as young people. But most of all, I really hope that we can leave a good amount, 10, 15 minutes for questions, because you have two experts here that you're very fortunate to hear from today. Not to build them up too much, but we really are lucky to have them. I'll just say a few brief words, then we'll dive into the program. Our first guest panelist is Jackie Boudry. She's the Ann Arbor City Clerk. How many U of M students do we have here right now? There we go. Okay. There's more. I know there's more in other breakout sessions as well. But Jackie's been clerk there for 18 years. Was the 2019 Michigan City Clerk of the Year, and is also president of the Michigan Association of Municipal Clerks. So she brings a really, really interesting perspective and expertise. And I hope that you can take advantage of this time to ask some questions towards the end of the session and hear what she has to say. And our other guest is from the other rival school, City, my alma mater, go green. Marie Wicks, City Clerk of East Lansing. Marie is an expert in the space as well, but she also, not to question anyone's devotion or put anyone's devotion ahead of any others, but she came out of retirement to be a clerk again, to be the interim clerk. So she really loves this stuff. Yeah. She loves election administration, and we're grateful to have her in that capacity as city clerk and here today. So without further ado, we will jump in. Oh, and if I didn't introduce myself, which I don't think I did, I'm Ben Gardner with All Voting is Local. I hope those chicken sandwiches were good. We'll take credit for them if they were good. We will not take credit for them if they were bad. But we're really proud to support the event. We work very closely with Landon, and it's been good to talk with so many of you today. So without further ado, let's test this. All righty. Clicker. There we go. So this is just a breakdown of some of the topics that we want to discuss: voter registration options, voting methods and process, polling location experience, the role of poll workers. Really want to dive in during that time. We want to explain to you and urge you to consider why being a poll worker is so important today. I know I've talked to a lot of people today that have been poll workers, have spoken to how valuable that experience is. So we hope that we can appeal to some of you to apply to be poll workers. And then we'll go over the vote count, vote reporting, and certification process before opening up for a question and answer. So topic number one, voter registration. A simple question. We'll start with Jackie. How does same-day voter registration on campus work?
So same day registration, obviously since Michigan's Proposition 18.3 passed, we have implemented, we call it same day registration, but actually what it did was eliminate the 30-day close of registration that used to present somewhat of a barrier for students. So both Marie and I and many of our other colleagues on college campuses are available on campus at our satellite voting offices. And you have the opportunity as a student to, it's full service, just like you were at City Hall. You could change your address, you could register to vote for the first time, you could apply for an absentee ballot, and then we'll get into probably a little bit later, but coming up in 2024, you'll also have the opportunity for true early voting, not just in-person absentee ballots. But the constitutional amendment gives all Michigan voters the right to register up to and including on election day. And we do make that available on campus.
Yeah, and you heard Clerk Boudry mention Prop 18.3, I believe it was, and which you may have heard Jeremy Moss earlier. mention how popular that was. That was a really important first step. I'm actually old enough to have been in college when it was a lot harder to vote as a student, a lot more confusing. So that was a big step. Next question for you, Clerk Wicks. We heard a little bit about the new registration options, but what are some of the things that you think students should know before they choose to register to vote on campus? Just as they make that decision and then decide, I'm going to go do it. What are some things that you would, as a clerk, think urge them to consider?
Sure. So first of all, I'm hoping going forward that students will be registered to vote when they're or eligible or in the pipeline when they're 16. We're really looking forward to those laws coming into be. What we found, both Jackie and I have experienced long lines. I was on campus in November, that the registration portion is really what is time consuming. So if a person is already registered, we can, pull their name up. The first thing that we do when we register a voter is make sure they're not registered somewhere else. If they are, we can simply pull them into our jurisdiction. That's so much easier than, going in and keying in all their information and then switching over to issuing them a ballot. But the other things I love for students to know is that just please know you are eligible. There are people out there who don't want students to vote or tell you to vote at home, what have you. Elections are in November. You have lived on campus or off campus in a college town probably since August. So don't question that. We heard a lot of that self-affirmation this morning from the legislators, and I really loved their comments. I have goosebumps still from listening to them. And so just know that this is your right. I would argue even your obligation as a citizen, and you should exercise it. We're trying to make it as easy as possible for you to do that. And yeah.
Ben, if I could add one thing, so Marie and I are kind of as a team actively really lobbying and pushing for this new legislation that would, one other thing, while students can register in those last 15 days, that 30-day close of registration went away, and you can register up to and including on election day, but in the last 14 days, it has to be in person with your local clerk. But then the caveat to that is that you have to prove your residency. So, and if your residency isn't proven by a Michigan driver's license, so it could be what we often see is our university housing portal. Students might show their, we call it Wolverine Access in Ann Arbor or at University of Michigan. They might show their dorm address through that portal. And then that ballot is processed as challenged. It's time consuming for clerks to process as challenged. And then you have a first time voter coming in to vote and not understanding why their ballot is different than everyone else's. So Marie and I just testified this week, and we are really, really hopeful that the final push to get the elimination of this unnecessary challenging of ballots in the 14 days will be eliminated.
Yeah, I'm really glad you raised that point, because it just goes to show there's a lot of this that's kind of in the weeds when it comes to student voting. Oh, can you hear me? Oh, great. Just sort of knowing all those details is important, and fighting for the policy changes that we need to fight for is really critical. So one thing that I wanted to touch on here is I think a lot of students have questions that they might want to bring to a clerk or ask themselves, ask their colleagues. So what if you can maybe limit it to 2 or 3? What are the most common questions you get about registration on campus?
So, will my car insurance be affected? Will my scholarship be affected? Those kinds of things. I'm not sure we can really answer. I think most of the time not, but those are definitely the concerns that students have. A lot of times they do want to keep their parents' same address, but we do encourage students, especially when they came to vote on election day and they really couldn't go home. We shared with them, you are eligible to vote here. You can show your student ID. You can show your out-of-state driver's license as long as it's current. We're looking at the name and the picture. And then you can pull up the app, the Live On app, which is what we have at MSU, and register to vote. But And then if you really, really want to, you can go back online and change your address back after elections. Not that I want to create an administrative nightmare for anybody, but there is a lot of flexibility now in the way we register to vote. And again, being able to do everything online, the resources provided by the Secretary of State assist us greatly in that.
Thank you. Jackie, anything to add about change of address or common questions?
Just maybe a quick comment. So one of the things we discovered with the satellite offices is that it brings a comfort level to students. They're not going to City Hall. So we've put a lot of energy into our offices looking welcoming. They're interesting and informative. And then I see our partner in the audience from UMich Votes, and we maybe in the clerk's office, our focus is registering voters in Ann Arbor, but UMich Votes brought in the last election a separate space within the satellite office that said, maybe you're looking to register in your home state. And so they had university partners helping with, let me help you navigate how to get that ballot from New Jersey or, Texas or wherever it might be. So we, in that partnership, were able to help students register in Ann Arbor and also help them registering or how they might get a ballot in another state. So that was, I think, a nice feature that we had at our satellite office last year.
That's wonderful. As you can tell, there's a role for students, student advocacy organizations, community advocacy organizations to play here. So, as you think about what do you want to do to help students vote, start taking these notes in your head and reach out to local organizations to help, because it's super helpful, very needed. So we'll move on to the next topic, voting methods. And I also just want to stress, if you have questions, feel free to write them down or use the QR code. We'll get to those at the end. But voting methods and processes. So, respecting that we did talk a little bit about Proposal 2 earlier today and at other events, what would you say are the biggest changes brought about by Proposal 2 that impact the student vote? Jackie, you want to take that first?
Sure. So the biggest thing that Proposition 2 that we'll see is for all voters is early voting, obviously. I think a lot of students took advantage of no reason absentee and voted early through that process. So now they will have that opportunity to actually tabulate their vote. And then maybe not as important to students, but still worth noting that Proposition 2 also brought permanent ballot to Michigan. So in the past, you would have to regularly apply for an absentee ballot. And now you have the opportunity to sign up to have a ballot mailed automatically without that application step. We see more that our longtime residents will take advantage of that, but it is another opportunity. But the biggest change on campus, I think, will be early voting.
Sure, I love this question. So ditto, of course. So yes. So East Lansing is fortunate enough to have a city council election in November. So we are actually piloting in partnership with some folks, including the Bureau of Elections, to pilot an early voting center. Last night, I was giving a presentation on Prop 2, Prop 3, just the way elections have changed over the years at the East Lansing Public Library to some community members. And a political scientist said to me, somehow or another, he got information that he said, are you prepared for 6,000 people to want to register to vote and vote on election day? And I said, I really wanted to sleep, last night, but early voting will, provided we can persuade students that it's cool to vote early, not often, but early. We are going to have at least 14 days of early voting in November, and this is the big kahuna. We're all planning for November. If we need more, we'll have more. Personally, because I like to have fun. You cannot be in this job and not try to have some fun because it's stressful. I would like to have like a voting madness on a Friday. So start it at 6, go to like 2 a.m. and wear your pajamas, whatever it takes. Have, the cheerleaders there, whatever it takes to get students out and get jazzed. You have to have fun if you work in a college town, right? But early voting is really going to be key for us to have that capacity to process all of those votes. So yes, it's important.
You know, I do kind of want to dig in a little bit on something you just mentioned about making it fun. Even though it wasn't on the agenda per se, but we want to make voting fun. Obviously, I know other great clerks out there, Mike Segrist, others have talked about this. And I mean, you may have said it in jest about, voting in your pajamas, but, or having a
Nope, that was
party.
not in jest.
No, not in jest. Okay. So, what, can you speak to that idea a little bit, just about, taking advantage of early voting and making it kind of a communal experience? Like, what are you hearing as clerks? What do you think about that? And how can community partners help in sort of making it a little bit more accessible, a little bit more fun?
So I'll start with that. I'll let you do the community members if you. So before, when I was retired, kind of, I did work 3 consecutive years in the satellite voting location, one at off campus and then 2 on campus. So last year we were open 40 hours a week prior to the election. So we were available for a month in advance, but it's kind of unglamorous to come and vote, at IM East, at the fire exit, and nobody's there to say, wow, you go, first time voter. So yeah, I mean, it was a little unglamorous. I think that, and I don't want to take away from the gravity of voting, the responsibility, the right, but I think it's important especially for first time voters, to have some kind of recognition, some kind of really memorable experience, because we want them to talk to their peers. We want them to continue doing this. So yeah, that's what really guides me, is you can only, hand out a sticker with so much enthusiasm and hope that made it for them. So yeah, so I think that's really important, just to make it a very special, memorable, private, confidential experience.
I want to just, before we move on to the next topic, just ask Jackie, what do you think this means for poll workers, the transition to early voting, poll workers and other people assisting you in your role as a clerk? How will this change impact them and the need for their help?
Well, we've already started reaching out to our regular poll workers, or election inspectors, as they're called, and asking them, what their thoughts are on 9 days of early voting as well as election day. And then for the folks in this room, we also are careful and thoughtful in assignments on campus. So we're asking our workers, would you be interested in working at a satellite clerk's office and doing voter registration? And some people are like, that sounds great. It's fun. It's exciting. We have a lot of things going on at the satellite office that make it different than, the city hall experience, or a early voting, say at one of our libraries or something. So we are careful in our recruitment to make sure that the people working with a first-time voter want to be there. And that often is other young people, but sometimes we have some, city hall retirees who come back and say, yeah, I'd put me at the satellite office. That sounds like, a lot of fun. And people that want that face-to-face interaction versus processing mail ballots. So we do obviously expect that 9 days of early voting will probably mean we're recruiting more, but we do have some expectation that some of our regulars will be in for the whole time. And just wanted to tell Marie, we'll take a note on that pajama party, because we're also looking at.
I see a friendly competition here.
Yeah, we're another thing about setting up a satellite office is being, aware of the audience. So, the first time around, we realized, we're open a little bit too early, and the students weren't taking advantage of our morning hours. So we shifted that in 22 a little bit. And then you have to be careful of the football schedule, because nobody's coming, on those days. So we're very aware of, who we're trying to reach, and fun is part of that.
Just a real quick technical question. Something we do here sometimes is, well, how do I know my ballot counts? So in Michigan, increasingly it's easier to track your ballot. Marie, do you want to just say a few words about what you can do if you're a student and you're wondering, hey, did someone receive my ballot? How does that work?
Michigan Voter Information Center. Again, Secretary of State has a great flyer. I wish I had brought it with me, but you can track your ballot. You can look at your ballot. You can check to see whether you are registered to vote. You can find out where your precinct or your polling location is. And so I just think that's a fantastic, if you've returned your ballot via mail, which I don't necessarily recommend that anymore. If you have to, great, but if you can drop it off, also wonderful. But your clerk, once they receive your ballot, they actually go into your voter record on the qualified voter file and they check it in. It's a good system. They check it in very quickly so that you can go on the MVIC site and see, oh, the clerk has my ballot. That's pretty, certainty there that your ballot is going to get counted. So I think that's a great system, and thank you for the question.
Yeah, it's a great segue.
Oh,
Jackie, you want to
Just
take
a
next?
real quick follow-up, and then obviously the advantage of early voting as opposed to even in-person absentee is that you would actually see your ballot being tabulated. So a lot of voters who maybe weren't as comfortable with mail ballots, now with early voting, will have that comfort level of I'm the one that tabulated my own ballot. Although I will say, I think that generally we didn't have the concerns from students that maybe the larger population had about what happened to my ballot. So we certainly in Ann Arbor appreciated. I think there was a trust between the clerk's office and our university partners.
That's great. And you touched on a little bit about absentee voting, the early voting. It seems straightforward, but can you just say a little bit about what happens to those ballots that a student might use or cast at a drop box? And how can they find their drop box?
Oh, that's a good question about the Dropbox. I'm not sure if that's available in
It
MBIT. Go
is.
ahead, please.
Yeah. So all of the Dropbox locations are put into the qualified voter file at the local level, which uploads to the MVIC is Michigan Voter Information Center. So if you look up on michigan.gov/vote, where do I vote? How do I vote? You will see your polling location is such and such a school. These are the city clerk satellite offices, and these are the city clerk's drop boxes. And then early voting is my understanding. It's not there yet, but that you will also see these are your opportunities for early voting. And that will vary community to community, but in Ann Arbor, you will have, we'll have 3 citywide early voting opportunities. So you could go to any one of 3 places, and then each ward will have some of the libraries will be only for a specific section of town.
ID. There's a lot of disinformation out there. What can you say to students? What's your guidance as a clerk to make the experience easiest for everybody? What forms of ID can they bring?
Sure. Great question, of course. So I think it's been mentioned a couple times, a student ID from an accredited institution of higher learning. I'm looking at Melanie to say yes. Tribal ID, even a high school ID, although not mine. That's supposed to make you laugh, but military ID, passport. I believe that the types of IDs that are acceptable forms of ID will be expanding at some point, but important that those are the acceptable forms. So we're not other types of IDs are not able to be used, but by the same token, remember, especially with students, when I talk to students, I do say your student ID is fine. Sometimes we have to work with our poll workers, as Jackie said earlier. We want to make sure we have people who understand the ins and outs of working with students, who are passionate about working with students. Their student ID is perfectly acceptable. Their driver's license from New York is acceptable. If it's current, that's key. Again, as workers, we are looking at the picture and the name. We are not looking at an address. We are not looking at a signature. So that's really important for students to know their rights. I say that even though as a person who trains poll workers, sometimes, Poll workers have to learn a lot, and sometimes those little things get past them. I also just wanted to talk about ID for a second too. So at this point in the Constitution, folks still have the right, if the person is not in possession of an ID, they can sign an affidavit. This does not mean that people aren't going to be asked to show an ID. That's a fallacy. What this has done is codify what we had before. If you have an ID, your name is on the poll list, you should show it. If you left it in the car, you don't have it with you, you can sign an affidavit. This is not I have my ID, but I'm not going to show it. Well, then you can't sign an affidavit and then you can't vote. So, so please do show your ID. When I was on campus, I didn't have any problems with people showing their ID. But also, if you don't have one, you left it in your car, don't let anybody tell you you can't vote. If your name is on the list, you can sign the affidavit. Yes. So that's a really good question. The question is, does signing the affidavit in any way jeopardize the status of your ballot? It does not. Your ballot goes through the tabulator. There's nothing noted in what's called the electronic poll book. It's our automated list of voters in the precinct. So there's no status attached to that. There's no challenge to your ballot. There's no preparation of your ballot as identifiable. So no, that's a really good question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Clerk Wicks. We'll take one more and then we'll move on.
So when you come in to vote, you I probably opened a can of worms here, but so you'll fill out, every voter will fill out what's called an application to vote. So you'll put your name, you'll put your current address on it, and you'll sign it. But as far as what the poll workers are verifying, when they're looking at your photo ID, no, they are not matching the address to the ID. They're looking at your name and your picture.
It's a photo ID requirement.
Yep.
No, we're talking about applying to vote at the polling place. Yes, we check residency in the last 14 days for registration. Pardon me? It either can be through an address on the Michigan driver's license or another government document I talked about, like the Wolverine Access. If the student has a document from the University of Michigan, which is a state institution, that says this student lives at East Quad. That's their proof of residency. They live off campus and they have a Detroit Edison bill. That's proof of residency. So that's only in the last 14 days. If a voter registered today to be voting in the next year, they just sign an affidavit swearing that they're a 30-day resident of the state of Michigan. They don't have to prove residency except in the last 14 days before an election. Well, they still fill out a voter registration form with their address. And when we enter their address into the qualified voter file, it assigns them based on the geography to their ward and precinct. But the election day photo ID is a photo ID requirement. And that's why we encourage students to bring their M card versus other ID, because for poll workers and challengers, we have to keep reiterating, we're checking their photo ID. They're not proving residency at the polls.
I definitely want us to get around to the poll worker topic here in a second, but while we're on the topic of sort of technical questions, ballot curing sounds very weird. But it's a straightforward concept. Can you just briefly, Jackie, if you want to take this, explain what ballot curing is and why it's an important option for people if they choose to use it?
Well, I assume you're talking about with an absentee ballot, like a question,
Yeah.
With their signature.
Yeah, correct.
So we often will get, I shouldn't say often, but we get ballots returned in our Dropbox or even in the mail, and it comes back and either we have a question about the signature that's on file in the qualified voter file, or in some cases, maybe the voter forgot to sign. And so the curing process, and now some of the requirements for timing of that process have been codified in law. But we will, in this next year, have very strict date, times for contacting a voter to say, hey, we got your ballot, but you forgot to sign it. Or we got your ballot, but it looks like maybe your wife signed hers and yours. And so the signature curing requirements are to protect the voter and to ensure that clerks are reaching out in a timely manner to fix those common mistakes.
We appreciate that. And then what if somebody wants to spoil their ballot? What does that mean?
Sure. So the voters have an option. Voters have an option to spoil their ballot until, and it was touched on a little this morning. Once we have early voting, and let's say you voted an absentee ballot, but you wanted to tabulate it in an early voting center. Once your ballot goes through the tabulator, there's no getting it back. So it's like buying something on clearance that you can't return. So once it goes to the tabulator, you can't do, sorry. I just want it to resonate. So because that really is a final step there. If it goes to the tabulator. However, let's say that you're voting absentee, you've dropped your ballot off at the clerk's office and your person drops out of the presidential primary at the last minute and you want to vote for somebody that's still actually in the run, and this happens. So you have until, is it 10 a.m. on the Monday?
Well, so all of these deadlines are going to change.
They're going to change.
And some of the cities, depending on their size, are going to be able to tabulate some of the absentee ballots ahead of election day. So all of these spoiling deadlines are going to back up with same as early voting. If I put that through a tabulator, it's a secret vote and there's no pulling it out. So the ability to spoil will also back up with early tabulation and early voting. And then just not to further confuse this, but some of these laws they're kind of in like a purgatory right now. We don't know what date the presidential primary is. And so depending on the legislature's adjournment, maybe they talked about this morning, but we don't know which of these laws will make the presidential primary for effectiveness. So we don't know what date the presidential primary is. So some of this in February or March we're learning as well,
And
what the rules will be.
And I know the handful of clerks, I see them nodding their head or, shaking, expressing frustration. Yeah. So talk to your state reps maybe about pushing that stuff. But I want to dive into the poll worker topic. So I know several people today have said, hey, I was a poll worker. It was a great experience. I'll start these questions out of order with a biggie. Why is it important at this point in time to be a poll worker? And why is it important for young people to consider being poll workers?
Oh, it's always so important to be part of the process. And I just want to carve out one little piece of the poll worker stuff, because I know you'll have a lot to add. So first of all, if you're registered to vote anywhere in the state, you can work anywhere in the state. That was changed. I think our colleague from Lansing, Chris Swope, helped change that law. Before you used to have to work in the county in which you were registered. So this opens things up. Why is this important? Well, Lansing, East Lansing, maybe Ann Arbor, we have a lot of trouble finding Republicans. Other places down county in Ingham County, they have trouble finding Democrats. So we want people to feel comfortable traveling to another jurisdiction. I would just say, so I would encourage students of there are 7 recognized parties, but there are certain functions that must be performed by a Republican or a Democrat. I like to call that a mechanism of integrity at every level of elections. But it's very, very important that we have bipartisan Republican Democrat participation to underpin our election integrity. I really cannot say enough how important that is. So you might feel like, you're in East Lansing and I'm a Republican or, whatever. Please come work for us if you're a Republican. I need you. So it's just very, very important that everyone's interests partisan affiliation is represented. Again, it adds to the integrity of the process.
We hear that over and over from clerks, so they mean it. They're looking for that representation. So yeah, please take them up on that. For what would you say to students, just to pitch them on what experience you get, and also, the practical benefits of it? Jackie, do you want to speak to the
Sure.
what they get out of the process? And
Well,
yeah.
first of all, they get paid and
You want to go on dates, you want to go to movies, right? You want to concerts.
I think we pay pretty well in Ann Arbor for poll workers.
You do.
Kind of the opposite of what Marie said, and we do also try to trade with some of our neighbors for partisan balance. But on campus, if you're a student trying to organize or a clerk trying to, or thinking about setting up a satellite office or a polling place on campus, we finally embraced the undergraduates need time off. And where we're looking for the most workers is in the morning and the evening. It's busier and they have opening and closing duties. So it's really not that hard to let an undergrad take from like 10 to 3 off to make sure they can go to their classes. So we used to say we wanted a full day commitment, and then we kind of realized that we were missing a group of potential workers.
I'm stealing that one from your book.
Yeah. So the time that we need them is when we're busiest and have the most duties, and they're able to do that for us. And then the other thing is, if you're at a big university, like we have in Ann Arbor, we utilize the law students, and they bring a interesting perspective that, our traditional workers and maybe our younger workers might be a little intimidated by some of the questions they get, by the challengers. And so we're just always looking at all the possibilities of whether that's the high school kids are eager and can take the whole day, or the undergraduates, if you put them in the place where they live and go to school, we can accommodate their schedule. And then graduates and law students in particular are also very valuable to us.
And it's one more thing you put on your resume, which I can say at a young age, if you have anything on your resume, you stand out. So a lot of you at 16 are you're truly impressive, so kudos. But there's also that sense of connecting with serving your community and that sort of the purpose behind it. There's also, and from my conversations, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the really practical need for young people who are anyone that's proficient with technology, and young people can help bring that expertise. Marie, can you speak to that?
100%. So before coming out of retirement, I was a precinct chair for 7 elections. Phenomenal experience. You really get to learn the nitty-gritty of everything. I so appreciate election inspectors. We could not do our job without literally these boots on the ground. But I've had the pleasure of working with high school students. One election, actually it was 2020 presidential election. And I had a high school student that felt very comfortable walking everybody through their station. So I said, run with it. You're doing a great job. It was great for everybody. And I don't mean to be ageist, because really and truly there is a lot of ageism out there, and I'm about to be 60 in 3 weeks, but I am on the young end of the election inspector spectrum. So people that do this, I've seen people literally put this in their obituary that they were an election inspector. It really is a principled, noble endeavor. You can do it in a very short period of time. And again, democracy cannot function without this. So I think for all these reasons that it's so important for youth to get involved. I imagine that once you do, and you graduate from college and you get your job, maybe you're working with the state of Michigan, they get election day off, except if you work for the Bureau of Elections. But maybe you'll decide that you want to do this. You want to take a day off from your high paying job, but you want to go do something to serve your community. So I just can't emphasize enough participating as a worker and as a voter.
Yeah, thank you, Clerk Wicks, because there's an excellent panel. I think most of you saw it earlier about talking about, serving your community at a young age, and Attorney General Nessel, Clerk Ferlini, Senator Moss, and others had some really, impressive things to say about that. But some of, for me personally, running for office wouldn't be an option. Maybe you're the same, and you think that's intimidating. But being a poll worker, it's hard work, but it's maybe a little bit of a lower barrier to entry to serve your community, and it establishes a pipeline. So I would just really encourage people to consider it. Before we move on to the final topic, Clerk Boudry, could you just address some common misconceptions that you see in your role? Can you tell me what the role of a poll worker is and what it's not? We encounter some misconceptions from time to time. Can you just speak to that a little bit?
About what the poll worker role
What
is?
the role, yeah.
Sure. So, and we do sometimes, unfortunately, lose some poll workers. You're not, you're doing the work. You're an election official, making it all happen. You're not campaigning. You're not doing the get out the vote. And so unfortunately, sometimes people find that to be a little more exciting. Sometimes young people do, or they get more politically involved. And then I don't really want to be in your absentee count board all day. I want to be out, knocking doors or at the 100 feet campaign line. And so we appoint people on a partisan basis for balance, for the integrity of the election. We have a Republican and a Democrat who seal the bag, who sign the materials, but it is not affiliated in a political way in the sense of actively campaigning or that get out the vote activities. So that's sometimes we have to explain that to people. No, you would just literally be, checking in voters and then you're not in that challenger role either. So you're there from one side or the other, but you have tasks to do, not to necessarily play that partisan role.
And the training process, does it vary by city and county? How extensive is that? Clerk
Sure.
Wicks, do you want to?
Sure. I think we're probably pretty much all on the same page. I believe it's municipalities that are more than 10,000
That's right.
that can provide their own training. Less than 10,000, it's the responsibility of the county clerk. Election inspectors should be trained every 2 years, but I know most of us probably conduct training prior to every single election. Sometimes there's something different on the ballot. So in East Lansing, for example, it's city council, plus we have 3 charter amendments. So I always like to do training for a lot of people in advance of every election. For a lot of people, it's just really a refresher, which is nice too, because while Jackie and I are sometimes the frogs in the boiling water dealing with this stuff all the time, for workers, they may not, especially if you're in a township, you might only work an election every 2 years. So it's paid. It's usually a couple hours. We do try to make it a little less dry. But and the other thing that I would say about anybody who's going to be an election worker going through training, you might hear a lot of stuff, especially if you're a first-time worker. But I promise you, if you rotate stations and the first 10 times you do something, you'll just have it down pat. There is a position called a precinct chair, which I had the pleasure of doing. That's a person who sort of manages the precinct during the day. So if you go to work, you're not on your own. Somebody's there giving you guidance. Somebody's there to troubleshoot in case an issue arises at the polls. So you should feel really safe and comfortable stretching out and doing that.
Thank you. So I do want to make sure we have time for questions. So the next part final part is kind of technical and straightforward, but I do want to cover it just briefly, if that's okay. I think there's a lot of questions about just like straightforward, what happens to my ballot? What happens to all the ballots at 8 o'clock? So I'll start with what happens to ballots after they arrive to your office, what happens to early voting ballots, and then what happens to ballots cast on election day once 8 p.m. hits. If you want to take that first.
Sure.
Boudry.
So the of course, early voting, we haven't done yet, but those early vote ballots will be tabulated by the voter as in real time, but the results will not be run until after 8 o'clock on election day. So the ballots from early voting will be sealed every night, and then the equipment will be sealed and then, reopened every day for the 9-day period. The mail ballot process, as we're collecting our drop boxes and getting ballots through the US mail and in person as well, similar process that we're collecting those ballots are in a secured, for us, we have a secure storage room that's only accessed by clerk staff. And then those are in that secure location until election morning, where they go to the absentee count board. Possibly if there's early tabulation, that might happen before election morning. But same thing, that the absentee counting board, the results are not tallied and released until after 8 p.m. And this work might go on well past 8 p.m. Certainly Marie and I were both familiar. If you're in line to vote by 8 p.m., you have a right to vote. And if you're also in line to register to vote, you have a right to register and vote. So if we have people still trying to get registered, that's going to delay our counting, because they're not only registering, they're also going to get a ballot. So all of that process is happening in various stages in the weeks leading up to the election, depending on how that ballot is getting back to us, whether it's an in-person election day, absentee, or early vote. But the final results will all be released not until after 8 p.m.
Great. So I want to leave you with this. Oh, we'll go back. So Democracy MVP, you might have heard earlier. You can sign up to be a poll worker there, or connect with your local clerk to apply to be a poll worker. Which, do you have a preference? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I guess I just did. Democracy MVP versus.
Well, if you're already our poll worker, don't sign up anywhere else.
There you go. Yeah.
I won't steal yours. Don't steal mine. An
Um,
hour apart. So.
But
We actually are very grateful for the Democracy MVP for collecting new interested people. But obviously clerks are very protective of their existing database of workers.
yeah. So I want to just encourage everyone to do that. And then, do we have time for a couple questions, Landon? No time for questions. So. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Well, you can register and vote if you're in line by 8 p.m. We're calling it. This time I won't make you wait. And that is because it is already 4 o'clock. So we want to close the event on time. I just want to do a last minute thank you to our sponsors for the event today. League of Women Voters, All Voting is Local, especially providing the food for today. Promote the Vote for providing travel stipends. If you signed up for a travel stipend and did not pick it up, please make sure you stop on the way out so you do not leave without that. And then the Michigan League of Conservation Voters as well. And the other last thing I want to note is pictures. We have whiteboards. You can write you vote and why you vote. And we also have the signs, I don't know where they are, that has the logo on it. So we encourage everyone to do pictures at the end to remember today. And with that, I want to thank everyone for coming out today. This was the biggest student voting summit that any state has held ever. And last year we had the highest youth voter turnout in the country. And guess what we're going to do next year? We're going to beat some more records, and we're also going to be the highest again. And that's because of everyone like you coming today and supporting this work. And so we really appreciate it. I hope you take a lot of good things that you can do to support this work in your local community from today, and that we can make a difference going forward. Stay connected. If you want to figure out if there's someone today that you talked to and you missed their contact information, but you had an amazing conversation and want to connect and do things after, let me know. I can hopefully facilitate connecting you all. And so thank you again. There's some food. Grab some food boxes. We don't want food going to waste. And so take some with you. We know college students like free food, so please take it all.
Hey, Landon, can I say something real quick?
Absolutely.
I just want to thank my colleague and friend from East Lansing, because I asked her 5 minutes before this started if she wanted to join me. And if that had happened to me, I probably would have had a heart attack.
Thank you.
And you
We
did
like
a great
working together.
job.
And we'll take a minute to note too, that there are no rivalries in voting. We want everyone to Harbor and East Lansing, and they both. So we want everyone to vote. We don't care who they are. If they have the right to vote, then we want to make sure they're able to use it. So. Awesome. So you all are free to go. Remember, pictures, travel stipend if you haven't got it, and pick up extra food.